You think you know what happens when power dies, when a duchess falls silent forever and a duke stands hollow beside her grave. But what if I told you the real story begins the moment someone crashes that funeral and whispers the one word that shatters an empire? Murder. Stay with me until the end of this, because what Adrian Blackthorne discovers in the ashes of his perfect lie will change everything you thought you knew about loyalty, guilt, and the cost of loving the wrong person. Vulcan. The rain had the decency to wait until after the eulogy. Adrian Blackthorne stood at the head of his wife's casket with his hands folded behind his back and his face carved from the same marble as the cathedral floor beneath his boots. Around him, the entire aristocracy of the kingdom had gathered in their blacks and silvers, their grief polished to a shine, their whispers echoing off vaulted ceilings that had witnessed 3 centuries of Blackthorne burials. Evelyn's casket was white oak lined with silk the color of winter mornings. Fresh roses covered the lid. Everything perfect, everything controlled, everything false. He did not cry. Dukes did not cry. He had learned that lesson at 7 years old when his father died and his mother slapped him across the face for sobbing at the funeral. Grief is private, she had said. Weakness is contagious. And so Adrian stood motionless while Archbishop Cornelius droned on about Evelyn's charity work and gentle spirit and all the beautiful lies that dead women inherit when the living need to feel better about ignoring them. His younger brother Victor stood to his left, face appropriately solemn, hands clasped in front of him like a choir boy. To his right was Lady Beatrice Caldwell, Evelyn's lifelong companion, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Behind them stretched rows of nobility, counts and viscounts and lesser lords who had spent years kissing Adrian's ring and positioning their daughters within striking distance of his bed. Now they came to mourn the wife they had spent a decade pitying. Poor Evelyn, so fragile, so sickly, so incapable of giving the Duke an heir. The Archbishop raised his arms. The choir began to sing. Adrian felt nothing. He had felt nothing for weeks now, not since the morning he walked into their bedroom and found Evelyn cold beneath the sheets, her skin the color of old wax, her eyes half open and staring at the ceiling as if she had seen something terrible in her final moments. The doctors called it heart failure, natural causes. She had always been delicate, they said. It was only a matter of time. He should have felt relief. Their marriage had been a political arrangement that curdled into mutual resentment within 6 months. Evelyn wanted love. Adrian wanted an heir. Neither got what they needed. By the end, they barely spoke except through servants, their vast estate a battlefield of closed doors and separate wings. He told himself her death was a mercy, told himself he would mourn appropriately and then move forward with the cold efficiency that had always defined his life. But something was wrong. He could feel it in the way the servants would not meet his eyes, in the way Evelyn's personal physician had left the city 3 days after her death without saying goodbye, in the way her private correspondence had vanished from her desk, leaving only empty drawers and the faint smell of burned paper. The choir finished. The Archbishop gestured for the mourners to pay their final respects. One by one, they filed past the casket, touching the wood, murmuring prayers, glancing at Adrian to measure his reaction. He gave them nothing. His face remained a mask of aristocratic composure, while inside his mind circled the same questions on a loop. Why did Evelyn lock her bedroom door the night before she died? Why did the maid who found her quit without collecting her final wages? Why did Victor insist on handling all the funeral arrangements himself? The procession moved forward. Adrian barely saw their faces. He was thinking about the last conversation he had with his wife, 4 days before her death. She had found him in his study after midnight, still dressed in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like a ghost, even then. "We need to talk," she had said. "Please, it is important." He did not look up from his papers. "Whatever it is can wait until morning." "No, it cannot wait. Adrian, I need you to listen to me. I need you to—" "I am busy, Evelyn." She stood there for a long moment. He could feel her staring at him, could sense the desperation radiating off her like heat, but he did not raise his head, did not give her the acknowledgement she needed. And after a while she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading down the hall, and that was the last time they ever spoke. 4 days later, she was dead. The memory sat in his chest like a stone. He told himself it meant nothing. Evelyn was always dramatic, always imagining slights and conspiracies where none existed. She had probably wanted to argue about redecorating the East Wing again, or complain about how he never attended her charity functions. It was not his fault she chose to die before finishing the conversation. But the stone remained. The last mourner passed. The Archbishop nodded to the pallbearers. They moved forward to seal the casket and carry it to the family crypt beneath the cathedral. Adrian prepared himself for the final ritual, the walk through the crypts, the placement of Evelyn beside his father and grandfather and all the other Blackthorns who had ruled and died and been forgotten. Another hour, and it would be finished. Another hour, and he could return to the emptiness of the estate and the business of continuing the bloodline with some other unfortunate woman. The cathedral doors exploded open. Every head turned. The sound echoed through the stone chamber like a gunshot. Rain poured through the entrance, wind howling, candles flickering and dying. And in the doorway, silhouetted against the storm, stood a woman. She wore black, but not the refined mourning black of the aristocracy. This was the black of someone who did not care about propriety, who had thrown on whatever dark clothes she could find and come here with only one purpose. Her hair was soaked, plastered to her face. Her eyes found Adrian across the length of the cathedral and locked on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Selina. The name hit him like a blade between the ribs. He had not seen her in 8 years. 8 years since the summer he spent falling in love with a merchant's daughter who painted landscapes and laughed too loudly and made him feel like a human being instead of a title. 8 years since his mother found out and threatened to disown him if he did not end it immediately. 8 years since he stood in Selina's cottage and told her their relationship was a mistake, that he was engaged to Evelyn Ashbourne, that she needed to leave the city and never contact him again. He remembered the look on her face, the way she did not cry or beg or scream, just stared at him with those dark eyes and said, "You are going to regret this, Adrian. Not because I will hurt you, because you will hurt yourself." And then she left, disappeared into some other corner of the kingdom, and he buried the memory so deep he almost convinced himself it never happened. Until now. She walked down the center aisle. Water dripped from her coat. Her boots echoed on marble. The aristocracy parted for her like she was diseased, faces twisting in confusion and disgust. Who was this woman? How dare she interrupt a ducal funeral? But Selina did not look at them. She looked only at Adrian, moving forward with a terrible purpose. And he could not move, could not speak, could only stand frozen beside his wife's casket while the past walked back into his life. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the rain on her eyelashes, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she always used, close enough that when she spoke, only he could hear. She did not die from illness. Her voice was low, steady, each word a nail driven into his chest. Adrian's mouth opened. No sound came out. Around them, the cathedral had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Selina's eyes never left his face. Evelyn was murdered, Adrian. Someone in your house killed her, and they made it look natural so no one would ask questions. The world tilted. He felt Victor move beside him, felt hands reaching out to grab Selina, heard voices shouting for guards. But Adrian raised one hand and everyone stopped, because he knew. In that instant, looking at Selina's face, he knew she was telling the truth. Knew it with the same bone-deep certainty that had kept him awake every night since Evelyn died, pacing the halls, searching for the wrongness he could feel but not name. "How?" he managed. "How do you know this?" Selina reached into her coat, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a letter. The paper was cream-colored, expensive, monogrammed with an E in silver thread. Evelyn's stationery. "She wrote to me," Selina said, 3 weeks before she died, begging me to come back, begging me to help her. She pressed the letter into his hand. Their fingers touched for half a second, and he felt the contact like electricity. Then she stepped back, and her voice rose loud enough for the entire cathedral to hear. "Your wife knew she was going to die, Your Grace. She knew someone was poisoning her, and she died because no one believed her." The aristocracy erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying, Victor grabbing Adrian's arm and hissing that this was insane, that Selina was clearly deranged, that they needed to have her arrested immediately. But Adrian was not listening. He was staring at the letter in his hand, at Evelyn's handwriting, neat and careful, even in desperation. Selena, I know you have no reason to help me. I know what Adrian did to you was unforgivable, but I have no one else. Something is wrong in this house. I am being watched. My food tastes strange. Yesterday I found my medicine bottles empty, even though they were full the night before. When I ask questions, everyone smiles and tells me I am imagining things. But I am not imagining this. Someone wants me dead, and Adrian will not listen. He has not listened to me in years. Please, if you ever cared about him, if you ever cared about anyone, come back, before it is too late. Adrian's hands were shaking. The letter fell from his fingers, drifting to the cathedral floor like a white flag. He looked up at Selena and saw something in her face that terrified him more than the murder accusation, more than the chaos exploding around them. He saw pity. You failed her, Selena said quietly, and now you get to live with that. Then she turned and walked back down the aisle, past the screaming nobles, past the guards rushing in from the entrance, past Victor shouting for someone to stop her. But no one touched her. She moved through them like smoke, and then she was gone, swallowed by the storm, leaving only wet footprints on marble and the echo of 3 words that would destroy everything Adrian thought he knew. Evelyn was murdered. The cathedral descended into madness, lords demanding answers, ladies fainting into their husbands' arms, the archbishop trying desperately to restore order. Adrian stood motionless at the head of the casket, staring at the doors where Selena had vanished, feeling the architecture of his entire life beginning to crack. Victor gripped his shoulder. Hard. Adrian, listen to me. That woman is insane. Evelyn died of natural causes. The doctors confirmed it. This is grief talking. Paranoia. You cannot possibly believe... Adrian shook him off. His voice came out cold and flat and absolutely certain. Open the casket. Silence. What? Victor whispered. Adrian turned to face him. His younger brother's face had gone pale, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. Behind Victor stood Lady Beatrice, her handkerchief pressed to her lips, and for just a second Adrian saw something flicker across her expression, something that looked almost like fear. I said, open the casket. I want the body examined by independent physicians. I want Evelyn's bedroom sealed. I want every servant who attended her in the last month brought in for questioning. And I want to know exactly what happened to my wife. Victor's hand fell away. Your Grace, he said, and Adrian hated the formality, hated the way his brother's voice shifted into courtier mode. This is highly irregular. The family will... I do not care what the family thinks. Open the casket. The archbishop stepped forward, wringing his hands. Your Grace, with all respect, to disturb the dead in such a manner, to give credence to wild accusations from a stranger... She is not a stranger, Adrian said, and if I find out anyone in this cathedral knew about this and said nothing, I will burn their houses to the ground. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough that the nobles stopped whispering and started backing toward the exits. Loud enough that Victor went white as bone and Lady Beatrice made a small choking sound and had to sit down in the nearest pew. Adrian walked past them all, past his brother, past the casket, past the archbishop stammering protests. He walked out of the cathedral into the rain and stood on the steps, letting the water soak through his funeral clothes, washing away the mask he had worn for 8 years of pretending to be someone he was not. His wife was murdered. The woman he loved had tried to save her, and he had driven her away. And somewhere in his house, in his family, in the circle of people he trusted most, was the person who had killed Evelyn and thought they could get away with it. Adrian Blackthorne had spent his entire life being controlled by his mother, by his title, by the expectations of an aristocracy that valued power over truth and appearances over humanity. He had buried his feelings, sacrificed his happiness, married a woman he did not love, and destroyed the woman he did, all because that was what dukes were supposed to do. Not anymore. The rain fell harder, thunder rolled across the city, and as Adrian stood on the cathedral steps with his wife's casket behind him and his brother's lies crumbling in his wake, he made a decision that would either save him or destroy him completely. He was going to find out who killed Evelyn. He was going to burn down every wall, expose every secret, drag every truth into the light, no matter how ugly or devastating. And then he was going to make them pay. Behind him, he heard Victor calling his name, heard the panic in his brother's voice, heard footsteps running, guards shouting, the whole careful choreography of aristocratic control beginning to collapse. Adrian smiled. For the first time since Evelyn died, he felt something other than numbness. He felt rage. Ikik. The Blackthorn estate sat on 200 acres at the edge of the city, a sprawling monument to old money and older cruelty. Adrian arrived an hour after the cathedral disaster to find the house in chaos. Servants rushing through hallways, carriages fleeing down the drive as panicked nobles made excuses and disappeared. Word of Selina's accusation had spread faster than plague, and now everyone associated with the Blackthorn name was scrambling to distance themselves before the scandal swallowed them whole. Adrian did not care. He walked through the front entrance without acknowledging any of them, went straight to his study, and locked the door behind him. Then he poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, drank it in one swallow, and began to think. Evelyn was murdered. That meant someone had access to her rooms, her food, her medicine. Someone she trusted. Someone who could move through the house without suspicion. Someone who benefited from her death. The obvious answer was him. He was the husband. He stood to inherit everything. The estate, the fortune, the political connections. Evelyn's death freed him to remarry, to produce an heir, to continue the bloodline without the burden of a sickly wife. If the authorities decided to investigate, he would be the first suspect. But Adrian knew he had not killed her, which meant someone else had. Someone who wanted him to look guilty. Or someone who thought Evelyn's death would go unnoticed in the noise of their miserable marriage. He thought about Victor. His brother had always been ambitious, always chafing under the weight of being second-born. Victor managed the estate finances, handled correspondence with Parliament, attended social functions Adrian found tedious. He was charming where Adrian was cold, diplomatic where Adrian was blunt. Everyone loved Victor. And Victor had been the one insisting they move quickly with the funeral, that prolonging the mourning period would only invite gossip and speculation. Then there was Lady Beatrice. Evelyn's closest companion, the woman who had been by her side through every illness, every disappointment, every lonely night when Adrian chose his study over his wife's company. Beatrice came from minor nobility, her family's fortune built on shipping contracts and questionable loans. She had attached herself to Evelyn years ago, back when Evelyn was still the golden daughter of the Ashbourne line, and marrying her meant proximity to power. What would Beatrice gain from Evelyn's death? Adrian sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. He remembered the look on Beatrice's face in the cathedral, that flicker of fear when he demanded the casket be opened. He remembered how quickly she had volunteered to handle Evelyn's personal effects after her death, sorting through letters and jewelry and clothing with an efficiency that seemed almost rehearsed. And he remembered something else, something that had not seemed important at the time. 2 months ago, he had been walking through the East Gardens late at night, too restless to sleep, when he heard voices from the greenhouse, low and urgent. He paused outside the glass walls, hidden in shadow, and watched as 2 figures moved inside among the plants. Victor and Beatrice. They were standing close. Too close. Victor's hand on Beatrice's arm. Beatrice leaning into him, her face tilted up, their voices too quiet to hear, but the intimacy unmistakable. Adrian had turned and walked away, dismissing it as none of his business. Victor was unmarried. Beatrice was a widow. If they wanted to carry on an affair, that was their concern. But now, in the wake of Evelyn's death, the memory took on a different shape. What if it was not just an affair? What if Victor and Beatrice had been planning this for months? Adrian's eyes snapped open. His heart was pounding. It made a sick kind of sense. Victor wanted power. Beatrice wanted security. With Evelyn alive, Victor remained the spare heir, and Beatrice remained a hanger-on dependent on Evelyn's charity. But with Evelyn dead and Adrian implicated in her murder, or driven mad by grief and scandal, the estate would fall to Victor by default, and Beatrice would be right there beside him, the loyal companion who helped him through the tragedy. It was elegant, brutal, exactly the kind of long game that Victor excelled at. Adrian stood up. He needed proof. Selina's letter was a start, but it proved only that Evelyn suspected something. He needed medical evidence. He needed to find out what happened to Evelyn's correspondence. He needed to track down the servants who had disappeared, and he needed to find Selina. She had come to the funeral for a reason, not to cause chaos. Selina had never been cruel. She came because Evelyn had asked her to, because despite everything Adrian had done to her, Selina still believed in doing the right thing. He owed her an apology. more than an apology. He owed her 8 years of explanations and the truth about why he had been too much of a coward to choose her over his title. But first he needed to keep her safe. If Victor and Beatrice had killed Evelyn to protect their conspiracy, they would not hesitate to kill anyone else who got in their way. Adrian unlocked his desk drawer and pulled out a leather journal. Inside were names and addresses of people who owed him favors. Investigators, physicians, lawyers who operated in the gray spaces of the law. He had spent years cultivating these connections for business purposes, never imagining he would need them to investigate his own family. He was writing the first letter when someone knocked on the study door. "Come in." The door opened. Victor stepped inside, his face a carefully composed mask of concern. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed. "We need to talk," he said. Adrian did not look up from his letter. "I have nothing to say to you. Adrian, this is madness. That woman, Selena, she is clearly unstable. Evelyn's death has been hard on all of us, but to accuse us of murder, I did not accuse you of anything." Victor paused. The silence stretched. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. "Of course not. I only meant, where were you the night Evelyn died?" Victor's smile disappeared. "What?" Adrian set down his pen and looked at his brother for the first time. "Where were you?" "It is a simple question. I was in my room, sleeping. Can anyone confirm that?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Are you seriously interrogating me right now?" "Yes, this is insane. I am your brother. Which is why I am giving you a chance to tell me the truth before I bring in people who will not be as polite about it." They stared at each other across the desk. Adrian watched his brother's face, looking for cracks, for tells, for any sign of the guilt he knew was hiding underneath. But Victor was too good at this. He had been playing courtier politics since he was 15. He knew how to lie without flinching. Finally, Victor straightened. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes. I was with someone that night, someone whose reputation I am trying to protect, which is why I have been discreet about it. But if you insist on dragging everyone's private affairs into the open—" "Who?" "Beatrice." The name landed like a stone. Adrian felt his suspicions solidify into certainty. Of course it was Beatrice. Of course Victor would use an affair as his alibi. And if they were together the night Evelyn died, that meant they had either killed her together or Victor had done it while Beatrice provided cover. Adrian kept his face neutral. "I see." Victor relaxed slightly. "Look, I know how this sounds, but Beatrice and I have been careful. Evelyn never knew. No one knew. We have been planning to make it official after a respectful mourning period, but my wife's inconvenient murder has complicated your timeline." Victor's face went hard. "You are out of line." "Am I?" "Because from where I am sitting, you and your secret lover both had access to Evelyn's rooms. Both had reasons to want her dead. And both of you have been very eager to close this case and move on before anyone asks uncomfortable questions." "You're insane," Victor hissed. "Evelyn died of heart failure. The doctors confirmed it. There's no conspiracy, no murder, nothing except your guilt looking for someone else to blame. Then you should have no problem with me exhuming the body and having it examined by independent physicians." Victor went white. "You would not dare. Watch me." They stood on opposite sides of the desk, breathing hard, the veneer of brotherhood finally stripped away. Adrian could see the calculation in Victor's eyes, the gears turning as he tried to figure out how much Adrian knew, how much he could prove, how much damage control would be needed. "Fine," Victor said finally. "Do what you need to do. Tear this family apart. Destroy our reputation. Drag everyone through the mud because some crazy woman told you a story at a funeral. But when this is over and you have found nothing, do not expect me to help you pick up the pieces." He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Adrian sat down. His hands were shaking. He had just declared war on his own brother, on his own family. There was no going back from this. Either he proved Victor and Beatrice were murderers, or he destroyed himself trying. But as he sat there in the silence of his study, surrounded by generations of Blackthorn legacy, he realized something that should have terrified him. He did not care. For the first time in his life, he was choosing truth over appearances, justice over reputation. The woman who had loved him over the family who had controlled him, even if it cost him everything. Adrian spent the rest of the day making arrangements. He contacted a physician in the city who specialized in forensic medicine, a man whose reputation for discretion was matched only by his obsession with solving mysterious deaths. He wrote to lawyers about freezing the estate accounts until the investigation concluded. He ordered the servants to preserve Evelyn's rooms exactly as they were, and he stationed guards outside to ensure no one disturbed the evidence. And then, as night fell and the estate finally went quiet, he did what he should have done 8 years ago. He went looking for Selina. He found her address through an investigator. She was renting a small apartment above a bookshop in the merchant district. Adrian took an unmarked carriage, no crest, no guards, just him and the rain and the weight of everything he needed to say. He stood outside the bookshop for 5 minutes, staring up at the lit window on the second floor, trying to find words that would not sound hollow. Finally, he climbed the stairs and knocked. The door opened. Selina stood in the doorway, still wearing her rain-soaked funeral clothes, her hair drying in waves around her face. She looked at him without surprise, as if she had been expecting this. "Hello, Adrian." He could not speak, could not do anything except stand there like an idiot while she studied him with those dark eyes that had haunted him for 8 years. "Are you going to arrest me?" she asked, "for disrupting the funeral?" "No." "Are you going to threaten me? Tell me to leave the city again?" "No." "Then what do you want?" He took a breath. "I want to know everything Evelyn told you. I want to know what you know about her death. And I want—" He stopped. The next word stuck in his throat. Selina waited, patient, the same way she used to wait when he was struggling to articulate something he felt but could not name. "I want to apologize," he said finally, "for what I did to you, for choosing fear over love, for being too much of a coward to fight for you." She looked at him for a long moment, then she stepped aside. "Come in." He walked into her apartment. It was small but warm, filled with books and plants and paintings in various stages of completion. Her easel stood by the window, a half-finished landscape catching the lamplight. It looked like a home, like the kind of life they could have built together if he had not destroyed it. Selina closed the door and gestured to a chair. Adrian sat. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed him one, then settled into the chair across from him. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows. "Tell me about the letter," Adrian said. Selina took a sip of wine. "It arrived 3 weeks ago. Out of nowhere. I almost threw it away without reading it. I thought it was from you. Another apology you did not mean, or another order to stay away. But the handwriting was different, so I opened it." "What did it say?" Selina reached into a drawer and pulled out the letter. Not the one she had shown him at the funeral. The full version, multiple pages, Evelyn's neat script covering both sides of the paper. She handed it to Adrian without comment. He read in silence, and with each paragraph the horror deepened. Evelyn had been documenting everything. The strange symptoms that started 3 months ago. The dizziness, the nausea, the migraines that came and went without warning. How her personal physician had prescribed new medication, but it only made things worse. How she found vials in her medicine cabinet that she did not recognize. How servants began watching her with pitying eyes, as if they knew something she did not. She wrote about overhearing a conversation between Victor and Beatrice in the library late at night, their voices too low to make out words, but the tone unmistakably conspiratorial. She wrote about how Adrian had stopped listening to her years ago, how she had become invisible in her own house, a ghost haunting the corridors of her marriage. And then, in the final pages, she wrote about her plan. "I'm going to contact Selina. I know Adrian loved her. I know he destroyed that love because he thought it was the right thing to do. But Selina is the only person I can trust. She is not part of this family. She does not want anything from me. And if Adrian will not listen to me, perhaps he will listen to her. If you are reading this, it means I failed. It means they killed me before I could escape. Please, do not let them get away with it. Do not let my death be another tragedy swept under the blackthorn rug. Make them see. Make Adrian see. He is not a bad man. He is just afraid, and fear makes people do terrible things." Adrian's vision blurred. He set the letter down carefully because his hands were shaking too hard to hold it. Across from him, Selina watched in silence, her expression unreadable. "She knew," Adrian whispered. "She knew they were going to kill her, and I did nothing. You did not know. I should have known. I was her husband. I should have—" "You were never her husband," Selina interrupted. "Not really. You were two people trapped in a cage pretending to be a marriage. She knew that. Everyone knew that. That does not excuse. No, it does not. But drowning in guilt will not help her now. Adrian looked up. Selena was leaning forward, her eyes locked on his, and he saw the same fierce determination that had first made him fall in love with her. The same refusal to accept easy answers or comfortable lies. What will help her, Selena continued, is you doing what you should have done 8 years ago. Stop being afraid. Stop caring what your family thinks or what society expects. Find out who killed Evelyn and make them pay. How? Adrian asked. Victor and Beatrice will cover their tracks. They probably already have. The servants are terrified. The doctors are bought. The evidence is disappearing by the hour. How am I supposed to? You start with me, Selena said. She stood up and walked to a desk in the corner. From the drawer, she pulled a small wooden box. Inside were more letters, newspaper clippings, and a leather-bound journal. Evelyn did not just write to me, Selena said. She was documenting everything. She kept a secret diary. She saved every prescription, every medical report, every suspicious conversation. She gave it all to me the day before she died. Adrian stared. Why did she not give it to me? Because she thought you were part of it. The words hit like a fist. Adrian opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Selena set the box on the table between them. She thought you wanted her dead, Adrian. She thought you and Victor and Beatrice had conspired together to kill her and divide the estate. It was only in her final letter that she started to doubt that theory, started to think maybe you were just blind instead of malicious. She thought I wanted to kill her. Yes. Adrian closed his eyes. The room spun. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage, about Evelyn's final days, shattered and reformed into something uglier and more tragic than he could have imagined. His wife had died thinking he wanted her dead, thinking the man she had married, however reluctantly, had decided she was worth more dead than alive. I need air, he managed. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The city stretched below him, thousands of lives continuing on in ignorance while his world collapsed. He pressed his forehead against the glass and tried to breathe. Behind him he heard Selena moving, felt her presence beside him. She did not touch him, but he could feel the warmth of her standing there, solid and real in a way nothing else was. I do not know how to fix this, he said. You do not fix it. You burn it down and build something better. He turned to look at her. She was so close he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, could smell lavender and rain and the faint scent of turpentine from her painting. 8 years had changed her, made her sharper, sadder, but also stronger. Selena had survived his betrayal and built a life without him, and looking at her now, he felt the full weight of what he had thrown away. Why are you helping me, he asked, after what I did to you? Selena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because Evelyn asked me to. And because despite everything, I still believe you are capable of doing the right thing when you stop being terrified of disappointing dead men. She meant his father, his grandfather, the generations of Blackthorn dukes who had ruled through cruelty and control and the absolute conviction that their name meant more than human decency. I am terrified all the time, Adrian admitted. Every decision I make, every word I say, I am always afraid I will fail the family, destroy the legacy, prove that I am not worthy of the title. Good, Selena said. Fear means you still have a conscience. The real danger is when you stop being afraid and start believing you deserve power just because you were born into it. She picked up the wooden box and pressed it into his hands. Take this. Read everything. And then tomorrow we go to the authorities and we destroy Victor and Beatrice and everyone else who thought they could murder your wife and walk away clean. Adrian looked down at the box. Inside was enough evidence to burn his family to ashes, enough truth to expose every lie they had built their empire on. He thought about his mother, about what she would say if she were still alive, about how she had spent her entire life teaching him that power mattered more than love, that reputation mattered more than truth, that Blackthorns protected the family above all else. And then he thought about Evelyn dying alone in her bed, convinced her husband wanted her dead, while the people she trusted most poisoned her slowly and smiled while doing it. The choice was not difficult. He took the box. Tomorrow, he said. We burn it all down. Selena nodded. She walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, one more thing he needed to say before the moment passed. Selina. She looked at him. I loved you. I still... Do not, she interrupted. Not yet. Not until this is finished. Not until you have proven you are the man I thought you were instead of the coward you chose to become. She closed the door. Adrian stood in the hallway holding the box of evidence that would either save him or destroy him completely. And for the first time since Evelyn died, he felt something other than rage or grief. He felt hope. Adrian did not sleep that night. He returned to the estate and locked himself in his study and read every page in Evelyn's diary, every letter, every medical report, and with each document the full scope of the conspiracy revealed itself in meticulous, horrifying detail. Victor and Beatrice had been planning this for over a year. They had started with small doses of arsenic mixed into Evelyn's tea, just enough to make her sick, to establish a pattern of declining health. They bribed her physician to prescribe medications that would exacerbate the symptoms. They isolated her from anyone who might notice inconsistencies. And they positioned themselves as the loyal family members caring for poor, fragile Evelyn while she slowly died. The plan was elegant because it did not require them to do anything sudden or suspicious. Just patience. Just showing up every day with tea and sympathy while Evelyn's body broke down piece by piece. But Evelyn had noticed. She documented every symptom, every conversation, every moment when something felt wrong. She saved vials of her medication and compared them to the prescriptions. She eavesdropped on Victor and Beatrice. She built a case against them piece by piece, knowing that if she confronted them without proof, they would simply kill her faster. And then she had written to Selina, because Selina was the only person outside the family who might actually help. Adrian finished reading as dawn broke over the estate. He sat back in his chair feeling hollowed out, exhausted, and absolutely certain of what needed to happen next. He rang for his steward. The man arrived minutes later, bleary-eyed and confused. Send for the city magistrate, Adrian said. Tell him the Duke of Blackthorn requests an urgent meeting. Tell him it concerns a murder investigation. And tell him to bring sufficient guards to arrest 2 members of the nobility. The steward went pale. Your Grace, if I may ask... You may not. Do it now. The man fled. Adrian stood and walked to the window. Outside, the estate was beginning to wake. Servants moving through gardens, groundskeepers tending the paths. Everything normal, everything continuing as if the world had not just shifted beneath their feet, but it had. And in a few hours, everyone would know it. He heard footsteps in the hall. The door burst open without knocking. Victor stood in the doorway, disheveled, his hair mussed, eyes wild. What have you done? He demanded. Adrian turned slowly. What I should have done the day Evelyn died. Victor's face twisted. You are making a terrible mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. Victor stepped into the room. Behind him, Adrian saw Beatrice hovering in the hallway, her face a mask of panic. They both knew. They had probably been watching the servants, listening to the household gossip, waiting for Adrian to make his move. Now the moment had arrived. You have no proof, Victor said. Whatever that woman told you... I have Evelyn's diary, Adrian interrupted. I have her medical samples. I have testimony from servants you thought too frightened to speak. I have everything I need to see you both hang. Victor went white. Adrian, please, listen to me. You do not understand. Evelyn was... Do not, Adrian said quietly. Do not try to justify what you did. Do not make excuses. You murdered my wife. You poisoned her slowly over months because you were too much of a coward to challenge me directly. And you did it thinking I would be too blind or too weak to figure it out. We did it for the family, Beatrice said from the doorway. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were hard. Evelyn was ruining everything. She could not give you an heir. She could not handle the social obligations. She was making us all look weak. We were trying to save the Blackthorn name by committing murder, Adrian finished. How noble. Victor moved toward the desk. Adrian, brother, please. We can fix this. We can make this go away. Just stay where you are. Victor froze. Adrian had not raised his voice, but something in his tone made his brother stop. Made them both realize that the man standing in front of them was not the passive, controlled Duke they had spent years manipulating. This was someone new, someone they had created by pushing too far. The magistrate will be here within the hour, Adrian said. I suggest you spend that time deciding whether you want to confess or whether you want to force me to present every piece of evidence in open court where the entire kingdom can watch you lie. You would destroy the family over this, Victor whispered. Over a woman you did not even love. No, Adrian said. I am destroying the family over what it turned me into, over every choice I made because I was too afraid to choose differently, over every person I hurt because I thought power mattered more than humanity. He looked at Beatrice. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, all her careful composure shattered. Evelyn deserved better than me, Adrian continued. She deserved better than all of us. And I am going to make sure everyone knows what you did to her. I'm going to make sure her name is cleared and her killers are punished, even if it costs me everything. Victor stared at him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Victor laughed. It was a broken, desperate sound. You're going to regret this, he said. When the scandal destroys what is left of our name, when the estate is seized and the title is stripped and you are left with nothing, then I will have nothing, Adrian said, and I will sleep better than I have in years. Victor turned and walked out. Beatrice hesitated, opening her mouth as if to say something, then thought better of it and followed. Adrian stood alone in his study and waited for the magistrate to arrive. And when the authorities finally came, when they arrested Victor and Beatrice and dragged them screaming through the estate while servants watched in horror, when the scandal exploded across the kingdom and the Blackthorn name became synonymous with murder and betrayal, Adrian felt something he had not felt in 8 years. He felt free. But here's what Adrian didn't know yet. Couldn't have known as he watched his brother being led away in chains, hidden in the walls of Evelyn's greenhouse, buried beneath years of careful lies and aristocratic silence, was one final secret. A secret that would reveal this murder wasn't just about power or jealousy or inheritance. It was about something far darker, something that connected to his own father's death 15 years ago. And when Adrian finally uncovered it, he would realize that Evelyn's murder was not the end of the Blackthorn curse. It was only the beginning. The magistrate's carriage disappeared down the drive with Victor and Beatrice inside, their wrists bound, their faces pressed against the glass like condemned prisoners watching their final glimpse of freedom. Adrian stood on the front steps of the estate and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just the vast emptiness that comes after you burn down everything you thought defined you. Behind him, the servants whispered. He could feel their eyes on his back, measuring him, wondering what kind of man arrests his own brother for murder, wondering if they were next. The household had fractured the moment the guards dragged Victor through the front hall, and now every person who had ever served the Blackthorn family was calculating their survival odds. Adrian did not care. Let them whisper. Let them judge. He had spent 32 years caring what people thought, and it had turned him into a ghost haunting his own life. He walked back inside. The estate felt different now, colder, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the violence of what just happened and decided to reject him. His footsteps echoed too loudly on marble floors. The portraits of dead Blackthorns seemed to follow him with disapproving eyes. Even the air tasted stale, like something had died in the ventilation, and no one had bothered to find the corpse. His study was exactly as he left it. Evelyn's diary still open on the desk. The wooden box of evidence Selina had given him sitting beside it like an accusation. He should have felt relief. He had done what needed doing, exposed the conspiracy, brought his wife's killers to justice. But something was wrong. Adrian sat down and pulled the diary closer. He had read it cover to cover last night, but exhaustion had made him sloppy, made him focus only on the murder plot, on Victor and Beatrice and their slow poisoning campaign. Now, in the gray light of morning, he forced himself to read more carefully, and that was when he saw it. 3 weeks before her death, Evelyn had written something that made no sense in the context of Victor's conspiracy. I went to the greenhouse today, the place Father Blackthorn loved so much before he died. Adrian never goes there anymore. I think it reminds him too much of losing his father, but I needed somewhere quiet to think, somewhere the walls did not have ears. I moved the old planter boxes and found something strange, a loose brick in the foundation. Behind it was a metal box. Inside the box were letters. Not love letters. Business letters. Ledgers. Names and dates going back 15 years. I do not understand what I am looking at, but I know it is important. I know it connects to something terrible. I am going to hide the box somewhere safe. If anything happens to me, someone needs to know where to look. Adrian read the passage 3 times. His father had died 15 years ago. Heart attack. Natural causes. The same thing they had said about Evelyn. The same careful staging, the same convenient timing. And now Evelyn had found hidden documents in his father's greenhouse. Documents important enough that she felt the need to hide them. Documents she died before revealing. Adrian stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. His heart was hammering. His father's death had never felt right. The old duke had been strong, healthy, ruling the estate with an iron fist even into his 60s. Then one morning he collapsed in the greenhouse and died before the physicians could arrive. Adrian was 17. Victor was 14. Their mother took over as regent until Adrian came of age, and by the time he inherited the title, she had restructured the entire financial system of the estate. He had never questioned it, never thought to investigate, because sons were not supposed to doubt their mothers. Heirs were not supposed to dig up family graves looking for murder. But if Evelyn had found evidence connecting his father's death to something criminal, Adrian grabbed his coat and headed for the door. The greenhouse. He needed to get to the greenhouse before Victor's arrest became public knowledge and anyone else came looking for whatever Evelyn had found. He was halfway down the hall when a voice stopped him. "Your Grace." Adrian turned. Lady Beatrice's personal maid stood in a doorway, her hands twisting her apron. She was young, maybe 19, with the kind of scared rabbit look that came from years of being invisible to people with power. "What?" Adrian said. He did not have time for this. The girl flinched but held her ground. "I need to tell you something. About Lady Beatrice. About what she asked me to do. Speak quickly." She swallowed hard. 3 days before the Duchess died, Lady Beatrice gave me a letter. Told me to burn it after the Duchess was gone. Told me if I breathed a word to anyone, she would make sure I never worked in a decent house again. "Did you burn it?" "No, I kept it. I do not know why. I felt wrong about it." "Where is it?" The girl reached into her apron and pulled out a sealed envelope. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Adrian took it from her and tore it open. Inside was a single page in Beatrice's handwriting, and as Adrian read, the floor seemed to tilt beneath him. "Victor, we cannot wait any longer. Adrian is asking questions about the estate finances. If he starts looking at the ledgers from his father's time, he will find the discrepancies. We need to accelerate the plan. Evelyn needs to die this week, and once she is gone and the scandal has settled, we move forward with the next phase. Your mother already approved the timeline. Everything is in place." Adrian read the last line again. Your mother already approved the timeline. His mother had been dead for 5 years, which meant either Beatrice was lying to manipulate Victor, or the conspiracy went deeper than he thought. He looked at the maid. Where did Lady Beatrice keep her personal correspondence? In her writing desk, second drawer, but the guards already searched her rooms when they arrested her. They were looking for poison, not letters. Adrian moved. He took the stairs 3 at a time, the maid scrambling to keep up. Beatrice's suite was in the east wing, a sprawling set of rooms that overlooked the gardens. The door was locked, but Adrian did not care. He kicked it open, the wood splintering, and strode inside. The room had already been torn apart. Drawers hanging open, paper scattered. The guards had done a thorough job, but they were looking for vials and powders and physical evidence of murder. They were not looking for what Adrian was looking for. He went to the writing desk and pulled out the second drawer. Empty. He yanked it all the way out and flipped it over. Taped to the bottom was another envelope. Adrian ripped it free and tore it open. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, dates and amounts going back 17 years. And every single transaction was signed by his mother, the Duchess Dowager Catherine Blackthorne. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of pounds moved out of the estate accounts into private holdings. Not Victor's accounts. Not Beatrice's. These went to someone named M. Crowley, a name Adrian did not recognize. But the pattern was clear. Every quarter for 17 years, massive sums of money had been siphoned from the Blackthorne fortune and funneled somewhere else. And it started 2 years before his father died. Adrian sat down on the edge of the bed. His mind was racing. His mother had been stealing from the estate, which meant she had been embezzling funds while his father was still alive, which meant his father had probably found out. And then he died. Adrian looked at the maid. She was hovering in the doorway, clearly terrified of what she had just helped him discover. Did Lady Beatrice ever mention someone named Crowley? The girl shook her head, but Lord Victor did. I heard him talking to her once. He said Crowley was getting impatient, that the payments needed to continue or everything would fall apart. When was this? 2 months ago, right before Evelyn started getting sick. Adrian stood. He needed to find out who Crowley was, needed to trace these payments, needed to understand what his mother had been involved in that required this much money and this much silence. But first he needed to get to the greenhouse. Because if Evelyn had found documents connecting his father's death to this conspiracy, those documents were the key to everything. He left Beatrice's rooms and headed for the gardens. The morning had turned gray and cold, clouds building on the horizon. The estate grounds stretched out in manicured perfection, everything trimmed and controlled, hiding the rot underneath. The greenhouse sat at the far edge of the property, half hidden by overgrown hedges. Adrian's father had built it 30 years ago, back when he still cared about things other than power and legacy. He used to spend hours inside working with rare plants, creating hybrids, nurturing fragile ecosystems. Adrian remembered following him as a child, listening to lectures about patience and cultivation and how the most beautiful things required careful tending. After his father died, no one had touched the greenhouse. His mother ordered it locked and left to decay. She said it was too painful to maintain. Now Adrian wondered if there was another reason, if she wanted to make sure no one went looking inside. The door was padlocked, but the metal was old and rusted. Adrian found a stone and smashed the lock open. The door swung inward with a groan. Inside the greenhouse was a tomb. Dead plants everywhere, dried husks of what used to be his father's life work. Broken glass crunched underfoot. The air was thick and stale. But underneath the decay, Adrian could still see the structure his father had built. The careful layout, the irrigation system, the planter boxes arranged in precise rows. He walked deeper inside. The light filtering through dirty glass turned everything green and ghostly. He found the planter boxes Evelyn had mentioned, heavy wooden structures along the north wall. He started moving them, shoving them aside with his shoulder, searching for the loose brick. It took 20 minutes. His hands were bleeding from splinters, and his coat was filthy, but finally he found it. A brick in the foundation that shifted when he pressed on it. Behind the brick was a hollow space, and inside the hollow space was a metal box exactly as Evelyn had described. Adrian pulled it out. The box was locked, but the mechanism was simple. He smashed it open with the same stone he had used on the door. Inside were papers, dozens of them, letters in his father's handwriting, financial ledgers, legal documents, and a journal. Adrian sat down on the dirt floor and started reading, and what he discovered made him understand for the first time that his entire life had been built on a foundation of carefully constructed lies. Mas, his father had been dying, not from a heart attack, from poison, the same slow, methodical poisoning that Victor and Beatrice had used on Evelyn, except in his father's case, the killer had been his own wife. The journal detailed everything, how his father had started noticing symptoms 6 months before his death, weakness, confusion, chest pains that came and went without warning, how he had consulted physicians privately and they found traces of arsenic in his system, how he had confronted his wife and she denied it, cried, blamed the servants, blamed stress, blamed anything except herself. But his father was not stupid. He started investigating, and what he found destroyed everything he thought he knew about his marriage. Catherine had been having an affair. Not with Victor. Victor was a child. With someone named Marcus Crowley, a financier from London with connections to half the criminal enterprises in the city. And Catherine was not just sleeping with him, she was funneling estate money to him. Hundreds of thousands of pounds over the course of years. Money that Crowley used to build his own empire while the Blackthorn fortune slowly drained away. Adrian's father had documented every transaction, every meeting, every lie Catherine told to cover her tracks. And he had been planning to divorce her, to expose her publicly, to reclaim the stolen money and destroy Crowley's operation. But before he could, Catherine had killed him, staged it as a heart attack in the greenhouse where no one would question it, where his body would be found hours later, too late for any physician to detect the poison. And once he was dead, Catherine took over as regent, consolidated her power, made sure Victor grew up loyal to her instead of questioning her. made sure Adrian was too buried in grief and duty to look too closely at the family finances. The plan had worked perfectly for 15 years, until Evelyn started asking questions. Adrian sat in the ruins of his father's greenhouse holding the journal and felt something break inside him. Not his composure. That was already gone. Not his faith in his family. That had died the moment he watched Victor being arrested. What broke was his understanding of who he was. He had spent his entire adult life trying to live up to his father's legacy, trying to be the kind of duke his father would have been proud of. Strong, controlled, unyielding. He had sacrificed his happiness, destroyed his relationship with Selena, married Evelyn out of duty, all because he thought that was what his father would have wanted. But his father had been murdered by the woman Adrian spent his entire life obeying. His mother had not been protecting the family. She had been protecting herself. And she had raised Adrian to be exactly the kind of man who would never question her, never dig too deep, never choose love over duty or truth over appearances. She had turned him into the perfect puppet, and by the time he realized it, she was already dead and the damage was permanent. Adrian stood up. He gathered all the documents from the metal box and headed back to the manor. His hands were shaking. His mind was spinning through the implications. If Victor knew about their mother's crimes, and the letter from Beatrice suggested he did, then Victor had not just been trying to steal the estate. He had been trying to continue their mother's work, keep the payments flowing to Crowley, keep the conspiracy alive, which meant Crowley was still out there, still pulling strings, still profiting from the Blackthorn name. Adrian needed to find him, needed to expose everything, not just Victor and Beatrice, the entire system of corruption his mother had built and his brother had inherited. But he could not do it alone. He needed Selena. He found her at her apartment above the bookshop. She opened the door already dressed for the day, her hair tied back, a smudge of paint on her cheek. She took one look at his face and stepped aside without a word. Adrian walked in and set the documents on her table. Then he sat down and told her everything. About his father's murder, about his mother's affair and embezzlement, about Marcus Crowley, and the 17-year conspiracy that had been bleeding his family dry while everyone pretended everything was fine. Selena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she picked up his father's journal and read in silence for several minutes. Then she set it down and looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Your mother killed your father," she said, "and your brother tried to kill your wife to protect the same conspiracy." "Yes." "And now you want to burn it all down." "Yes." "Even if it means destroying your family name forever. Even if it means the estate is seized and the title is stripped and you lose everything." "I already lost everything," Adrian said. "The moment I realized the people I trusted most were the ones poisoning me from the inside." Selena stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up, people going about their normal lives, unaware that a duke was sitting in a merchant district apartment planning to commit social suicide. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Adrian hesitated. He had come here intending to ask for her help investigating Crowley, tracking down witnesses, building a case strong enough that the authorities would have no choice but to act. But looking at her now, standing in the gray morning light with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on the street below, he realized what he actually needed. He needed her to tell him he was not insane, that choosing truth over family was not weakness, that walking away from the Blackthorn legacy did not make him a failure. He needed permission to stop being the man his mother had trained him to be. "I need you to help me finish this," he said finally. "Find Crowley. Expose the conspiracy. Make sure everyone knows what my family really was. And after I do not know, after I have no plan." Selena turned to face him. "Good. Plans are what got you into this mess. You spent your whole life following someone else's plan. Your mother's plan. Society's plan. The plan that said dukes do not marry merchant daughters, or investigate their own families, or choose conscience over reputation." She walked back to the table and sat across from him. Their knees almost touched. She leaned forward, and he could smell lavender and turpentine, and beneath it something uniquely her, something that made his chest ache with how much he had missed it. "So stop planning," she said. "Stop trying to control the outcome. Just do the next right thing and see where it takes you. The next right thing is finding Crowley. Then we find Crowley." "We." She smiled. It was small and sad, and the most beautiful thing he had seen in years. "You think I am going to let you do this alone?" After you finally grew a spine and decided to fight for something that matters? I have been waiting 8 years to see you become the man I thought you could be, Adrian. I am not missing it now." He wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, wanted to pull her close and bury his face in her hair and apologize for every moment of the last 8 years. But he knew she was right. Not yet. Not until this was finished. Not until he had proven he was worth the faith she was placing in him. "How do we find him?" Adrian asked. "The same way you find any criminal," Selena said. "You follow the money." They started with his bank statements from Beatrice's desk. The transactions all went to a private account at a bank in London. Selena knew someone there, a clerk who owed her a favor from years ago when she had painted his wife's portrait for free. She sent a letter that afternoon, and by evening they had a response. The account belonged to a shell company. But the clerk had done some digging and found that the company was registered to an address in the financial district, a building that housed several import-export businesses and law offices. Adrian and Selena took the train to London the next morning. They did not tell anyone where they were going, did not bring guards or servants or anyone who might report back to the estate. Just the two of them and a bag of documents and the grim determination to see this through. The building was unremarkable, gray stone facade, no signs indicating who worked inside. They climbed 3 flights of stairs and found themselves in a narrow hallway with several doors. The third door had a brass plaque that read M. Crowley Financial Services. Adrian knocked. A voice called for them to enter. They walked into an office that was surprisingly ordinary. Desk, filing cabinets, a window overlooking the street, and behind the desk sat a man in his 60s with silver hair and a face that belonged on currency. Handsome in an impersonal way. The kind of face that inspired trust without earning it. "Can I help you?" the man asked. "Are you Marcus Crowley?" Adrian said. The man's smile did not waver, but something shifted in his eyes. "I am. And you are the Duke of Blackthorn. I recognize you from the papers. Terrible business with your brother. You have my condolences." "Save it. I know about the payments. I know you are having an affair with my mother. I know she stole from the estate to fund your operation." Crowley leaned back in his chair. His expression had not changed, but the air in the room felt colder. "That is quite an accusation." Adrian pulled out the bank statements and threw them on the desk. "Here is your proof. 17 years of transactions, all signed by my mother, all going to your accounts." Crowley picked up the papers and examined them. Then he set them down carefully and folded his hands. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," he said. "Intelligent, ambitious, ruthless when necessary. She understood something most aristocrats do not. That money is worthless if you do not know how to make it work for you." "She was a murderer," Adrian said. "She was a survivor," Crowley countered. "Your father was going to destroy her, divorce her, leave her penniless. Everything she had built would have disappeared because he decided his pride was more important than her future. So she made a choice. And yes, that choice involved removing an obstacle. But do not pretend your father was innocent. He knew exactly how brutal the aristocracy could be. He just never thought his wife would use those same tactics against him." Adrian felt Selena's hand on his arm. A warning. "Stay calm. Do not let him provoke you." "Did Victor know?" Adrian asked. "About the murder?" Crowley shrugged. "Victor was 14 when your father died, but your mother told him eventually. Once he was old enough to be useful. She needed someone inside the estate to keep the payments flowing after she died. Victor was the obvious choice. And when Evelyn started asking questions, then Victor did what needed to be done. The same thing your mother would have done. The same thing any smart person does when someone threatens to expose a profitable conspiracy. He eliminated the threat." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Selena's grip on his arm tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" Adrian asked. "Why not deny it? Lie. Claim you have no idea what I am talking about." "Because you have no proof I did anything illegal," Crowley said. "The money your mother gave me was her money to give. I provided financial services in exchange for payment, all perfectly legitimate. And as for your father's death, I was in London when he died, miles away. You will never prove I had anything to do with it, but Victor can." Crowley smiled. "Victor is currently in custody facing murder charges for killing Evelyn. If he starts talking about your mother's crimes, who do you think the authorities will believe? A desperate man trying to deflect blame? Or the grieving duke seeking justice for his wife? You planned this, Selina said. It was the first time she had spoken since entering the office. Her voice was cold and steady. You knew eventually someone would figure it out, so you made sure Victor would take the fall while you walked away clean. Crowley looked at her with something that might have been respect. You must be Selina Whitmore. Catherine mentioned you. She was quite upset when Adrian gave you up. She said any woman who could make Adrian Blackthorne feel something was dangerous. I see she was right. Do not talk about her, Adrian said. Why not? She is relevant. You gave up the woman you loved because your mother told you to. You married a woman you did not want because your mother arranged it. You spent your entire adult life doing exactly what Catherine told you because you thought that made you a good son, a good duke, and all of it was a lie. She was using you the same way she used your father, the same way she used Victor. You were just another asset to be managed. Adrian took a step forward. Selina grabbed his arm harder. So what happens now? Crowley continued. You take those statements to the authorities and accuse a dead woman of crimes she cannot defend against? You drag your family name through the mud trying to prove a conspiracy that spans decades? You spend years in court fighting legal battles you cannot win. And for what? Justice? Closure? Those are fairy tale concepts, Your Grace. This is the real world. And in the real world, powerful men like me do not go to prison because poor men like you want revenge. Adrian stared at him. This man had destroyed his family, had helped his mother murder his father, had profited from 17 years of theft and manipulation and death. And he was sitting there smiling because he knew he was untouchable. You're right, Adrian said quietly. Crowley raised an eyebrow. I am? About one thing. I have no proof you did anything illegal. No way to connect you directly to my father's murder. No way to make the authorities care about a conspiracy that benefits them to ignore. Then we understand each other. But I do not need proof. I just need to destroy you. The smile faltered. Excuse me? Adrian pulled out another document from his bag. This one was recent. A list of Crowley's business holdings, investments, properties, clients. Information he had gathered over the last 2 days by calling in every favor he had, threatening every contact, using every ounce of Blackthorne influence he still possessed. You have been operating in the shadows for 17 years, Adrian said, trading on my mother's protection, using Blackthorne money to build your empire. But what happens when I go public with everything? When I tell the world that Marcus Crowley made his fortune by manipulating a duke's wife into murdering her husband? When every newspaper in the kingdom prints your name next to the words embezzlement and conspiracy and murder? Your reputation will be destroyed, Crowley said. The Blackthorne name is already destroyed. I arrested my own brother yesterday. The scandal is inescapable, but at least I will drag you down with me. Crowley stood up. His composure was cracking. You are bluffing. You would not sacrifice your family legacy over this. Watch me. They stared at each other across the desk. Crowley's face had gone red. His hands were shaking. For the first time since they walked in, he looked genuinely afraid. What do you want? He said finally. I want you to confess. Everything. My father's murder, the embezzlement, Victor's involvement. I want you to write it all down and sign it. And then I want you to disappear, leave England, never come back, never contact anyone associated with the Blackthorne family again. And if I refuse, then I burn your life to the ground. I go to every client you have and tell them who you really are. I go to the authorities with everything I know. I make sure that even if you avoid prison, your name becomes synonymous with corruption. You will never work in finance again, never be trusted again. You will die penniless and alone, and no one will remember you except as the man who destroyed a duke and got away with it until he did not. Crowley sat back down. He looked older suddenly, smaller. The mask of confidence had shattered, and beneath it was just a frightened old man who had been playing a game he thought he could never lose. He pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. It took 30 minutes. When he finished, he signed it and slid it across the desk. Adrian picked it up and read it carefully. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket. Leave tonight, Adrian said. If I find out you're still in England by the end of the week, I release everything to the press. Crowley did not respond. He was staring at his desk like a man watching his empire collapse in real time. Adrian and Selina walked out, down the stairs, into the street. It was raining again, cold and steady, washing the city clean. They did not speak until they were several blocks away. Then Selina stopped and turned to face him. "That was impressive," she said. "I'm not sure impressive is the word. Terrifying, maybe. You terrified Marcus Crowley, a man who helped murder a duke and got away with it for 15 years. Yes, Adrian. That is impressive." He looked at her. Rain was soaking her hair, running down her face. She looked fierce and beautiful, and exactly like the woman he remembered falling in love with all those years ago. "I could not have done it without you," he said. "Yes, you could. You just did not know it yet." She took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. And for the first time since Evelyn died, Adrian felt like maybe he could survive this. Maybe he could walk away from the ruins of his family and build something new, something honest. They walked back to the train station hand in hand while the rain fell and London moved around them, indifferent to the collapse of empires. They returned to the estate the next day to find chaos. Word of Victor's arrest had spread through the aristocracy like wildfire. Letters poured in demanding explanations. Creditors began calling in debts. Servants were quitting in droves, afraid to be associated with a house contaminated by scandal. Adrian did not try to stop them. He paid the ones who stayed double wages and told the rest they were free to leave. He sold properties to cover debts. He closed wings of the manor that no longer needed maintaining. He stripped away every excess, every pretense, every layer of false grandeur that had been hiding the rot underneath. It took weeks. The process was brutal and exhausting. Every day brought new revelations, new betrayals, new discoveries of just how deep his mother's corruption had gone. But Adrian kept moving forward, kept exposing truths, kept burning away the lies. And through it all, Selina stayed. She did not live at the estate. That would have been too scandalous even for Adrian's new tolerance for impropriety. But she came every day, helped him sort through documents, listened when he needed to talk, reminded him to eat and sleep when he was so buried in the investigation he forgot to be human. Slowly, something shifted between them. The old hurt faded. The distance closed. And one night, 3 weeks after they returned from London, Adrian found himself standing at her apartment door at midnight with no plan and no excuse except that he could not spend another night alone. She opened the door and looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. He walked in. The apartment was dark, except for a single lamp by the window. One of her paintings sat on the easel, half finished. A landscape of rolling hills and open sky, freedom rendered in oil and color. "I'm sorry," Adrian said, "for what I did to you. For choosing fear over love. For being too weak to fight for you." "I know," Selina said. "I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not even expect you to want me anymore. But I needed you to know that you were right. About everything. About what I was becoming. About what I lost when I let you go." Selina walked closer, close enough that he could see the paint stains on her hands, the faint lines around her eyes that had not been there 8 years ago. Close enough that when she spoke, he could feel her breath on his skin. "I forgave you the day you arrested Victor," she said, "because that was the moment I knew you had finally chosen to be yourself instead of what they told you to be. What if myself is not enough? Then we will figure out what enough looks like together." She kissed him. Soft at first, tentative, like she was testing whether this was real or just another dream that would disappear in the morning. Then harder, desperate. 8 years of longing compressed into a single moment. Adrian pulled her close and felt something inside him finally unlock. The last wall he had been holding up, the final barrier between who he had been forced to be and who he actually was, crumbled into dust. They made love slowly, carefully, mapping the changes time had carved into their bodies. And when it was over, they lay tangled together in her small bed and did not talk about the future or what came next. They just existed in the present, in the quiet miracle of finding each other again after everything that had tried to keep them apart. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, for the first time in 8 years, Adrian Blackthorne felt at peace. Victor's trial began 2 months later. It was the scandal of the decade. Every newspaper in the kingdom covered it. Every aristocrat had an opinion. The prosecution presented Evelyn's diary, the medical evidence showing arsenic poisoning, testimony from servants who had witnessed Victor and Beatrice's conspiracy. Victor denied everything, claimed he was being framed, claimed Adrian had fabricated evidence out of grief and jealousy. But the case was too strong. the proof too overwhelming. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Beatrice tried to make a deal, offered to testify against Victor in exchange for leniency. But the prosecutors did not need her testimony, and the judge was not interested in mercy. She was convicted as an accessory and sentenced to 20 years. Neither of them mentioned Catherine or Crowley. Adrian never introduced his father's journal as evidence, never revealed the deeper conspiracy. Because exposing his mother's crimes would not bring his father back. It would only hurt the few remaining people who still believed the Blackthorn name meant something. Instead, he kept the journal, locked it away in a safe with his father's letters and Evelyn's diary. Documents that would never see daylight but would always remind him of the price of silence. The estate survived, but barely. Adrian sold half the land to pay debts and legal fees. The manor was reduced to a skeleton crew. The Blackthorn legacy, once one of the most powerful in England, became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked aristocratic privilege. And Adrian did not care, because for the first time in his life, he was free. 6 months after the trial, Adrian stood in Evelyn's greenhouse and watched as workers cleared away the dead plants and broken glass. He was transforming it into something new, not a memorial. Evelyn deserved better than to be remembered only for how she died. Instead, he was building a sanctuary, a place where women could come when they had nowhere else to go. Women abandoned by their families, women running from violent husbands, women who needed space to heal and rebuild and remember they were more than the trauma that had been inflicted on them. It was the project Evelyn had secretly supported before her death, the charity work she had done while everyone dismissed her as too fragile to matter. Adrian was going to make sure the world knew what she had actually cared about, what she had died trying to protect. Selina stood beside him, sketching plans for a garden that would surround the building. She had moved into the estate 3 months ago, not as a mistress or a secret, as his partner, his equal. The woman he should have chosen 8 years ago and was choosing now without apology or shame. They were not married. Marriage felt like something from his old life, a tool for consolidating power instead of celebrating love. Maybe someday they would make it official, or maybe they would just live together in comfortable defiance of every social convention that had tried to keep them apart. It did not matter. What mattered was that they had survived, that they had burned down the legacy of corruption his mother had built and started creating something honest in its place. Adrian turned to Selina. She was concentrating on her sketch, her tongue between her teeth, the way it always was when she was focused. He loved that expression, loved everything about her that he had spent 8 years trying to forget. "What are you thinking?" she asked without looking up. "That I should have done this years ago. All of it. The investigation, the confrontation, choosing you over everything else." She looked at him finally. Her eyes were soft. "But you did not. And you cannot change that. You can only decide who you want to be from here. Who do you think I should be? Someone who stops asking other people that question." He laughed. Felt strange. He had not laughed in so long he had forgotten what it sounded like. Fair enough. They stood in the greenhouse that had become a crime scene and was now becoming a sanctuary. Around them, the workers cleared debris and built frames for new walls. The space was transforming, becoming something his father would have been proud of and his mother would have hated. Adrian decided that was the perfect legacy. Behind them, footsteps crunched on gravel. Adrian turned to see a messenger approaching, holding an envelope with an official seal. "Your Grace," the messenger said. "This came from the magistrate's office. It is urgent." Adrian took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He read it once, then again. Then he looked at Selina. "What is it?" she asked. "It is Victor. He is asking to see me. Says he has information about our mother that I need to hear. Information that will change everything I thought I knew about my father's death." Adrian crumpled the letter in his fist. He had spent 6 months trying to move on, trying to build something new instead of dwelling on the past. And now Victor was pulling him back in with promises of revelations and hidden truths. He could ignore it, could throw the letter away and continue with his life, let the past stay buried. But he knew he would not, because underneath everything, underneath the freedom and peace and new beginning, the question still burned. What else had his mother hidden? What else had she done that he still did not know about? And more terrifying, what if Victor was telling the truth? Adrian looked at the greenhouse, at the sanctuary he was building, at Selena standing beside him ready to face whatever came next. Then he made a decision he knew he could not take back. "We are going to the prison," he said. "I need to hear what Victor has to say." Selena did not argue. She just took his hand. And together they walked toward the one truth he had been avoiding since this entire nightmare began. That even after exposing the conspiracy and punishing the killers and burning down the legacy of lies, he still did not know the full story. He still did not know the worst of what his family had done. But he was about to find out. The prison was a monument to human misery dressed up as justice. Gray stone walls that swallowed light. Iron gates that clanged shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Adrian stood outside the entrance with Selena beside him and felt the weight of every choice that had led him here pressing down on his shoulders like physical mass. He did not want to see Victor, did not want to hear whatever poison his brother had decided to drip into his ears. 6 months of rebuilding, 6 months of learning to breathe without the constant pressure of family expectations crushing his chest. And now he was walking back into the darkness because Victor had dangled the promise of one more revelation. "You do not have to do this," Selena said quietly. "Yes, I do." "Why? What difference does it make now? Victor is in prison. The conspiracy is exposed. Your mother is dead. Whatever he knows cannot change any of that." Adrian looked at her. She was right. Logically, rationally, walking away was the smart choice. But logic had never controlled him. Fear had. And underneath all the progress, all the healing, all the new life he was building, the fear remained. The terror that he still did not know the whole truth, that somewhere in the rubble of his family's crimes was one more landmine waiting to detonate. "I need to know," he said, "even if it destroys me." Selena studied his face. Then she nodded. "So we go in together. And when he tries to manipulate you, when he tries to twist the truth into something that makes you doubt yourself, you remember who you are now, not who your mother trained you to be." Adrian took her hand. They walked through the gates. Inside, the prison smelled like sweat and despair, and decades of human waste inadequately cleaned. Guards led them through corridors lined with cells, faces pressing against bars to watch them pass. Adrian kept his eyes forward. He had spent his entire life learning how to move through hostile spaces without flinching. The skills translated well to this particular circle of hell. They reached a private visiting room. Small. A table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs on either side. A single barred window too high to reach. The guard gestured for them to sit. 10 minutes, he said, and I will be right outside." The door closed. Adrian and Selena waited in silence. Outside they could hear footsteps, metal scraping against stone. Somewhere distant, someone was screaming. Then the door opened again and Victor walked in. 6 months had carved him hollow. He had lost weight. His hair had gone gray at the temples. His skin had the pallor of someone who had not seen sunlight in half a year, but his eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, watching Adrian with the intensity of a predator measuring prey. The guard chained Victor's wrists to the table. Then he stepped out and closed the door behind him. The brothers stared at each other across the table. Victor's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "You came," he said. "You said you had information about father." "I do, but first I want to know something. How does it feel, brother, being the righteous duke, the man who destroyed his own family for justice?" Adrian did not rise to the bait. "What do you know about father's death?" Victor leaned back as much as the chains allowed. He looked at Selena. "And you brought her, the merchant girl, the great love mother tried so hard to erase. Tell me, Selena, was he worth the wait? Or did you realize by now that Adrian is exactly what mother made him? A coward who only fights battles he knows he can win." Selena's expression did not change. "I am not here for your opinion, Victor. Say what you have to say or we leave." Victor laughed. It was a broken sound. "Fine. You want the truth. Here it is. Mother did not kill father alone. She had help. Someone inside the house. Someone father trusted completely. Someone who prepared his tea the morning he died and watched him drink the poison and did nothing to stop it." "Who?" Adrian said. Victor's smile widened. "You." The word hit like a physical blow. Adrian felt the room tilt. Beside him, Selena went rigid. "That is a lie," Adrian said. "Is it?" Think back, brother. The morning father died. Who made his tea? Who brought it to him in the greenhouse? Who was the last person to see him alive before he collapsed? Adrian's mind was racing. He had been 17. His father had been in the greenhouse working. Adrian had brought him tea because that was what sons did. Spent time with their fathers. Tried to earn their approval through small gestures. I brought him tea, Adrian said slowly. But I did not know. Of course you did not know. Mother made sure of that. She told you father liked his tea a certain way. Gave you specific instructions. You followed them like a good son. And by the time father started showing symptoms, you were long gone. No one suspected the grieving teenage boy. No one thought to ask if maybe, just maybe, you had been the weapon mother used to kill her husband. Adrian could not breathe. The memory was there, sharp and clear, after 15 years of burial. His mother handing him the tea tray, telling him to make sure his father drank it all, praising him when he returned for being such a thoughtful son. She used me, Adrian whispered. She used all of us, Victor said. That was her gift, turning the people who loved her into accomplices without them ever knowing. You killed father. I helped cover up the embezzlement. Even Beatrice thought she was protecting the family legacy instead of enabling a murderer. We were all her puppets. The only difference is I figured it out years ago and decided to keep playing the game. You figured it out 6 months ago and decided to burn everything down in some pathetic attempt at redemption. Adrian stood up. The chair scraped against concrete. His hands were shaking. His vision had narrowed to the man sitting across from him wearing his brother's face and speaking truths designed to destroy whatever was left of his sanity. Why are you telling me this? Adrian said. What do you gain? Victor's smile disappeared. Because I want you to understand something. You think you are better than me. You think arresting your own brother makes you noble. But you are not. You are just as guilty as I am, more guilty. Because at least I knew what I was doing. You killed father and spent 15 years acting like a victim of mother's manipulation. You do not get to claim the moral high ground when your hands are covered in the same blood as mine. Selena stood. We are leaving. But Adrian could not move. He was 17 again, carrying a tea tray through the gardens, proud that his mother had trusted him with a task that might earn his father's rare approval. He remembered his father's smile when Adrian appeared at the greenhouse door. Remembered him taking the tea and ruffling Adrian's hair and telling him he was becoming a fine young man. Remembered walking away while his father drank poison and died thinking his son had done something kind. The memory crystallized into certainty. Victor was telling the truth. Adrian had killed his father, not intentionally, not knowingly, but his hands had delivered the weapon. His obedience had been the mechanism of murder, and his mother had made sure he never questioned it. Adrian turned and walked out. Selena followed. Behind them, Victor's voice echoed down the corridor. You cannot run from this, brother. You can burn down the estate and arrest everyone and build your little sanctuary, but you will always know. You are a murderer, just like mother, just like me. That is the real Blackthorn legacy, and you will carry it to your grave. Adrian did not speak on the ride back to the estate. Selena tried several times to start a conversation, to pull him out of wherever his mind had gone, but he could not find words, could not articulate the enormity of what Victor had just revealed. He had killed his father. The thought circled his mind like a vulture, landing and tearing and flying away only to circle back and land again. Every memory of his father recontextualized through this new lens. Every moment of grief revealed as guilt in disguise. When they reached the estate, Adrian went straight to his study and locked the door. He pulled out his father's journal and read the final entry again, the one dated the morning of his death. Adrian brought me tea this morning. He is a good boy, better than I was at his age. I hope when this is all over and Catherine is exposed, he will understand why I had to do this. Why I had to choose truth over family. I hope he will forgive me for the pain it will cause him. But I cannot let her continue poisoning everything we have built, even if it costs me my marriage, even if it costs me my life. Adrian set the journal down. His father had known something was wrong, had been documenting Catherine's crimes, had been planning to expose her. And the morning he decided to move forward, he died, which meant Catherine had not been guessing when she handed Adrian the poisoned tea. She knew. She knew her husband was about to destroy her, and she used her own son as the murder weapon, because no one would ever suspect a teenage boy of patricide. It was elegant, brutal, exactly the kind of strategy that defined everything about his mother. Adrian stood and walked to the window. Outside, the workers were still transforming the greenhouse, still building the sanctuary that was supposed to redeem Evelyn's memory and prove Adrian had changed. But you could not redeem murder with charity, could not build something clean on a foundation of blood. His father had died because of him, because he had been too trusting, too eager to please, too desperate for approval. And every decision he had made since, marrying Evelyn, destroying his relationship with Selena, maintaining the family legacy, had been an attempt to atone for a crime he did not even know he committed. The realization should have broken him, should have sent him spiraling into the same darkness that had consumed him after Evelyn's death. But instead, something else happened. He got angry, not the cold, controlled anger he had learned to channel through aristocratic composure. This was rage, pure and incandescent and completely beyond his ability to contain. His mother had stolen his entire life, had turned him into a weapon, and then spent 15 years making sure he never discovered what she had done. Had trained him to value duty over truth and family over conscience, specifically so he would never question the crime she was committing in their name. She had not just killed his father, she had killed him too. Killed the person he might have been if she had not spent his entire childhood programming him to be her perfect instrument of control. And even now, 5 years after her death, she was still destroying him, still pulling strings from beyond the grave through Victor's revelations and the weight of guilt she had engineered him to carry. Adrian picked up a crystal decanter from his desk and threw it against the wall. It exploded into 1,000 pieces. The sound was satisfying in a way nothing had been for months. So he threw another, and by the time Selena broke down the locked door, he had destroyed half the study, and his hands were bleeding from shattered glass. She did not try to stop him, just stood in the doorway and watched while he demolished the room that had witnessed 1,000 moments of his mother's manipulation. Watched while he tore down portraits and smashed furniture and screamed obscenities that would have made every Blackthorn ancestor disown him. And when he finally collapsed onto the floor surrounded by wreckage, she walked over and sat down beside him. "Feel better?" she asked. "No. Good. You should not feel better. What Victor told you is horrific, but it is also not your fault. I killed him, Selena. I carried the poison. I gave it to him. I walked away while he died. You were 17. You were obeying your mother. You had no way of knowing what you were actually doing. That does not make him less dead. No, it does not. But it also does not make you a murderer. It makes you a victim. One more person your mother destroyed because she valued power over human life." Adrian looked at her. Her face was calm, but her eyes were fierce. She had positioned herself between him and the door as if she thought he might try to run, as if she knew he was teetering on the edge of a decision that would either save him or destroy him completely. "Victor is right," Adrian said. "I do not get to claim moral superiority. I do not get to act like I am better than him when I have just as much blood on my hands." "Victor is a liar," Selena said. "He's trying to drag you down because watching you build something better makes him realize he could have made different choices, could have walked away instead of embracing the corruption, could have been the man you are becoming instead of the monster your mother created. I do not know what I am becoming." "Then let me tell you. You are becoming someone who chooses truth even when it destroys you. Someone who does the right thing even when it costs everything. Someone who would rather burn down a legacy of lies than live one more day pretending to be something you are not. That is who you are, Adrian, and that is why Victor hates you, because you are proof that victims do not have to become villains." Adrian wanted to believe her, wanted to take the absolution she was offering and let it wash away the guilt. But the facts remained. His father was dead because of him, and no amount of righteous anger or sanctuary building would change that. "What do I do?" he asked. "How do I live with this? The same way you have been living with everything else. One day at a time, one choice at a time. And when the guilt becomes unbearable, you remember that your father died trying to expose the same corruption you just spent 6 months destroying. You finish what he started. You make sure his death meant something." Adrian closed his eyes. He could see his father's face, the last smile, the trust in his eyes as Adrian handed him the tea. "He deserved better than me." "Yes," Selena said. "He did. So be better. Not for your mother, not for the family legacy, for him. Be the man he thought you were becoming before your mother murdered him and twisted you into her weapon. Adrian opened his eyes. The study was destroyed, glass and wood and broken crystal everywhere. It looked like a crime scene, like the physical manifestation of everything his mother had done to his family. "Help me clean this up," he said. They spent the next hour picking up pieces, throwing away the wreckage. By the time they finished, the room was bare but clean. Empty shelves, blank walls, a space waiting to be filled with something other than the weight of dead men's expectations. Adrian looked around the stripped study and felt something shift. Not healing, that would take years, but possibility. The faint suggestion that maybe destruction was not the end, maybe it was the clearing of ground before new growth. He turned to Selena. "I need to go back to the prison." "Why?" "Because Victor thinks he won. Thinks revealing my guilt will destroy me the same way his own guilt destroyed him, and I need to show him he is wrong." They returned to the prison the next morning. Same guards, same corridors, same visiting room. But this time when Victor was brought in, Adrian did not wait for him to speak first. "You are right," Adrian said. "I killed father. I carried the poison. I gave it to him. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life." Victor blinked. Clearly this was not the response he expected. "But here is what you do not understand," Adrian continued. "Guilt is not the same as responsibility. I was a child. Mother manipulated me, used me, turned me into her weapon without my knowledge or consent. And yes, that makes father's death partially my fault, but it does not make me the same as you." Victor's jaw tightened. "We are exactly the same." "No, we are not. Because when you found out what mother had done, you chose to continue her work. You chose to help her steal. You chose to kill Evelyn to protect the conspiracy. Every decision you made after learning the truth was yours. You cannot hide behind mother's manipulation anymore. You are a murderer because you chose to be one." Victor leaned forward as much as the chains allowed. "And what does that make you, brother? The noble victim. The redeemed sinner. You think building a sanctuary erases what you did? No, nothing erases it. But I can choose what I do next. I can choose to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than what mother made me. Or I can choose to do what you did. Embrace the corruption, blame everyone except myself. Spend my life justifying evil instead of fighting it." "You are lying to yourself," Victor said. "You think you have changed, but you have not. You are still the same frightened boy desperate for approval, still trying to prove you are worthy of a title built on blood. The only difference is now you are doing it through self-flagellation instead of obedience." "Maybe," Adrian said, "or maybe I am finally learning to live with the fact that I am never going to be worthy, that no amount of good deeds will wash away the bad. And that is fine, because trying is better than surrendering." Victor stared at him. For the first time since Adrian had arrived, his brother looked genuinely unsettled. "Why did you come back here?" Victor asked. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I do not want your approval or your forgiveness or your understanding. I came back to tell you that I am done letting you control the narrative, done letting you define what our family was. You can sit in this cell and believe we are both monsters, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you wrong." Adrian stood. Selena stood with him. They turned toward the door. "Adrian!" Victor called. They stopped. Adrian looked back. Victor's face had changed. The mask had cracked, and underneath was something raw and desperate. "Do you ever wonder," Victor said quietly, "what we could have been if mother had not poisoned everything? If we had just been brothers instead of pawns?" "Every day," Adrian said. "Then why did you arrest me? If you understand what she did to us. If you know we are both victims." "Because being a victim does not excuse murder," Adrian said. "It explains it, but it does not justify it. You killed Evelyn, and she deserved justice more than you deserved mercy." Victor's face closed again. The moment of vulnerability disappeared. "Fine. Go build your sanctuary. Pretend you are better than me. But when you are alone at night and the guilt is eating you alive, remember this conversation. Remember that I offered you the truth about what we really are, and you rejected it because accepting it would mean admitting your entire redemption arc is a performance." Adrian walked out. This time Victor did not call after him. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Adrian's life. Harder than Evelyn's death. Harder than exposing the conspiracy. Harder than any of the external crises he had spent 6 months navigating. Because external crises had solutions. This was internal. The kind of wound that did not heal through action or justice or even time. Just the slow, excruciating process of learning to exist with knowledge that could never be unknown. He told Selena everything. Every detail of the morning his father died. Every memory of his mother's careful manipulation. Every moment of his childhood that now made horrifying sense through the lens of what Victor had revealed. And Selena listened, did not judge, did not offer false comfort, just stayed beside him while he processed grief that was 15 years overdue. The sanctuary construction continued. Adrian threw himself into the work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every brick laid was an apology to his father. Every room finished was proof he could build something clean on the ruins of what his mother had destroyed. But at night, alone in the stripped study, he refused to redecorate. The doubts crept in. What if Victor was right? What if this was all performance? A desperate attempt to convince himself he was different, when deep down he was exactly what his mother had made him. A killer, a coward, a man who only fought for justice when it was convenient. 3 months after the prison visit, Adrian received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The seal was from a law office in London. Inside was a document that made him read it 3 times before he understood what he was looking at. It was a confession, written and signed by Marcus Crowley, but not the confession Adrian had extracted. This one was different, more detailed, and it implicated someone Adrian had not expected. Evelyn. According to Crowley's account, Evelyn had not been an innocent victim. She had known about Catherine's embezzlement, had discovered it 2 years into her marriage to Adrian, and decided to use the information as leverage. She had been blackmailing Catherine, demanding payments to keep quiet about the conspiracy. And when Catherine died and the payments stopped, Evelyn had approached Victor and Beatrice with an offer. She would keep their secrets, but only if they paid her. Victor and Beatrice had decided murder was cheaper than blackmail. Adrian set the letter down. His hands were numb. This could not be true. Evelyn had been fragile, sickly, incapable of the kind of manipulation this letter described. But then again, he had thought his mother was incapable of murder. He had thought Victor was loyal. He had thought he knew the people closest to him, and he had been wrong about everything. There was a second document in the envelope, a copy of Evelyn's actual diary, not the one she had given Selena, a different one, hidden. And the entries painted a very different picture of the woman Adrian had married. Evelyn had been playing a long game, gathering evidence, building leverage, planning to divorce Adrian and take half the estate through blackmail-fueled settlements. She had contacted Selena not for help, but to establish a witness who would back her story if things went wrong. Someone sympathetic who would believe Evelyn was a victim instead of a conspirator. The poisoning had been real. The murder had been real. But Evelyn had not been the helpless duchess Adrian thought he was avenging. She had been as ruthless as everyone else. Adrian stood and walked out of the study, found Selena in the greenhouse supervising the final stages of construction. She saw his face and immediately knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. He handed her the documents. Watched while she read, watched the confusion turn to shock, turn to something that looked almost like relief. "This changes everything," she said finally. "Does it?" "Yes. Adrian, if Evelyn was blackmailing your family, then she was part of the conspiracy," Adrian finished, "which means I have been building a sanctuary to honor a woman who was just as corrupt as the people who killed her." Selena set the documents down. "Or it means you have been building a sanctuary for the woman Evelyn could have been if your mother had not turned her into a blackmailer. For the woman who started out wanting to help abandoned wives and ended up becoming another casualty of the Blackthorn curse. That is generous. That is realistic. Your mother did not just destroy you and Victor. She destroyed everyone she touched. Evelyn, your father, even Beatrice probably started out as someone decent before Catherine turned her into a murderer. You cannot judge the people your mother corrupted by who they became. You have to look at who they were before she got her hooks in them." Adrian wanted to accept that interpretation, wanted to believe Evelyn deserved the redemption he was building in her name. But the facts were clear. Evelyn had been a blackmailer, had used the same tactics his mother perfected, had played the game and lost. "I do not know what to do with this," Adrian said. "You do what you have been doing," Selena said. "You finish the sanctuary. Not for Evelyn. For the women who need it. For the people your mother would have destroyed if she were still alive. You make sure the Blackthorn legacy becomes about helping victims instead of creating them. And if I am just lying to myself, if this is all just an elaborate performance to avoid admitting I am no better than Victor, then you are lying to yourself in a way that feeds the homeless and shelters the abused and gives desperate people a chance at survival. That is a better lie than the truth your mother lived." Adrian looked at the greenhouse, at the sanctuary taking shape, at the physical manifestation of his attempt to be something other than what he was raised to be. Selena was right. It did not matter if his motives were pure. It did not matter if he was performing redemption instead of earning it. What mattered was that the sanctuary existed, that it would help people, that it was one small piece of good carved out of the mountain of evil his family had created. And maybe that was enough. Or maybe it was not. But he was out of options for salvation, so he would take the imperfect redemption and hope it counted for something. The sanctuary opened 6 months later. 24 rooms, gardens designed by Selena, a medical wing staffed by physicians who asked no questions about how the women arrived or what they were running from, counselors, teachers, a library, everything Evelyn had dreamed of building before the Blackthorn curse twisted her into something unrecognizable. Adrian stood at the opening ceremony and gave a speech about second chances and breaking cycles, and creating safe spaces in a world designed to destroy the vulnerable. He did not mention Evelyn's blackmail, did not mention his father's murder, did not mention any of the ugly truths that had brought him to this moment. He just talked about the importance of building something clean from the ashes of destruction. And when he finished, the women who had already moved into the sanctuary applauded. These were women who had been beaten by husbands, abandoned by families, thrown away by a society that valued appearances over survival. They did not care about Adrian's motives, or his guilt, or whether his redemption was genuine. They cared that he had built them a place to heal. That night, Adrian and Selena stood in the empty greenhouse after everyone else had left. The space looked nothing like his father's original vision, but it looked like something honest, something that acknowledged pain instead of hiding it. "Do you think it is enough?" Adrian asked. "I do not know," Selena said. "Does it feel enough?" "No, but maybe nothing ever will." She took his hand. "Then we just keep building, keep trying, keep choosing to be better than what we came from, even if we fail. Especially if we fail." They stood together in the greenhouse that had witnessed murders and conspiracies and the collapse of a dynasty. And for the first time since his father's death, Adrian felt something other than guilt or rage or desperate attempts at redemption. He felt tired. Not the exhaustion of fighting. The exhaustion of someone who had finally stopped running from the truth, who had looked at the worst parts of himself and his family and chosen to exist anyway. It was not peace, but it was close enough. So the letter arrived 3 days later. Adrian was in his study when a messenger brought it. The envelope was unmarked. No seal. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made his blood freeze. "The confession Crowley gave you about Evelyn was a lie. I paid him to write it. I needed you to doubt everything, needed you to question your own redemption. Because in 2 weeks, I am getting out of prison on a technicality my lawyers discovered. And when I do, I'm going to take back everything you stole from me. The estate, the title, the family name. You thought you won, brother, but the game was never over. It was just waiting for me to make my next move. See you soon, Victor." Adrian read the letter 3 times. Then he walked out of the study and found Selena in the gardens. "Victor is getting out," he said. She turned. "What?" He handed her the letter, watched her face change as she read, watched the color drain from her skin. "How is this possible?" she asked. "I do not know. But if he is telling the truth, then everything we built is at risk," she finished. "The sanctuary, your position, everything." Adrian felt the familiar weight settling back onto his shoulders, the pressure of decisions he did not want to make, the knowledge that the fight was not over, would never be over. Because people like Victor did not stop. They adapted, evolved, found new ways to take what they wanted. And Adrian had a choice to make. He could fight, could use every remaining resource to keep Victor in prison, could wage a legal war that would consume years and destroy whatever was left of the Blackthorn name. Or he could walk away. Let Victor have the estate and the title and the poisoned legacy. Take Selina and disappear. Build a life somewhere his mother's ghost could not reach them. Both options felt like surrender. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the real test was not whether he could defeat Victor. It was whether he could accept that some battles could not be won, that some curses could not be broken, that sometimes survival meant knowing when to stop fighting and start running. Adrian looked at Selina. She was watching him with the same steady gaze that had witnessed every breakdown and revelation and moment of weakness over the last year, waiting for him to make a decision, trusting him to choose. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "We are leaving tonight." "Where?" "Anywhere. Everywhere. It does not matter, as long as it is far from here. What about the sanctuary? It will survive without me. It was never about me anyway. It was about creating something that could exist independent of the Blackthorn name. And Victor can have the ruins, can have the title and the estate and the ghost of our mother whispering in his ear, 'I am done fighting for a legacy that was built on murder.'" Selina smiled. It was small and sad and absolutely certain. About time. Abkan. They left that night. No announcements, no farewells, just two people walking away from an empire of lies with nothing but each other, and the knowledge that they had tried, had built something, had chosen truth even when it cost everything. The Blackthorn estate fell back into Victor's hands within a month. He returned from prison a conquering hero in his own mind, reclaiming what he believed Adrian had stolen. The sanctuary continued operating under new management. The women who lived there never knew the man who built it had disappeared. And somewhere far from England, in a small cottage by the sea, Adrian Blackthorn learned what it meant to live without the weight of his name. He painted with Selina, worked in gardens that belonged to no one important, introduced himself as Adrian with no title attached, and slowly, over months and years, the guilt began to fade. Not completely. It never would. But enough that he could wake up in the morning without immediately thinking about his father's death, or his mother's manipulation, or all the ways he had failed to be what he thought a duke should be. He learned to be just a man, flawed, guilty, trying, and in the end, that was the only redemption he ever really needed. But late at night, when the wind came off the ocean and the cottage creaked in ways that reminded him of the estate, Adrian would wake up and wonder. Wonder if Victor was happy ruling the ruins. Wonder if the sanctuary was still helping people or if it had collapsed under the weight of scandal. Wonder if somewhere in England his mother's ghost was laughing at how thoroughly she had destroyed all of them. And then Selina would reach for him in the darkness, her hand finding his, and he would remember why he left. Because some battles you won by refusing to fight them, some curses you broke by walking away, and some men you saved by letting them become no one at all. The cottage by the sea had been their sanctuary for 18 months when the past came knocking. Not metaphorically. Literally. 3 sharp raps on the door at dawn, the kind of sound that meant someone had traveled through the night to deliver news that could not wait. Adrian was already awake. He had been standing at the window watching the sun rise over the ocean, thinking about nothing in particular, which was itself a kind of victory. 18 months of learning to exist without the constant weight of guilt and legacy pressing down on his skull. 18 months of being no one, of painting with Selina and working in the garden and introducing himself to strangers as just Adrian, no title, no history, no curse. But the moment he heard the knock, he knew the piece was over. Selina appeared in the bedroom doorway, her hair loose, wearing one of his shirts. Her eyes met his and he saw that she knew too, that both of them had been waiting for this moment, even as they pretended they could escape forever. "Do not answer it," she said. Adrian walked to the door anyway, because running only worked until it stopped working, and whoever was on the other side of that door had found them despite all their precautions, which meant the message they carried was too important to ignore. He opened the door. A young man stood on the threshold, mud-splattered and exhausted, holding a sealed letter. The man's eyes widened when he saw Adrian's face. "Your Grace?" he stammered. "Not anymore," Adrian said. "Just Adrian." The man swallowed. "I was told to give you this. Told it was urgent. Told you would want to know immediately." "Know what?" The man handed him the letter and then backed away like Adrian was contagious. "Sir, I am sorry. I did not want to be the one to bring this news." He turned and practically ran back to his horse. Adrian watched him disappear down the coastal road. Then he looked at the letter in his hand. The seal was familiar. The sanctuary. The place he had built and then abandoned. He broke the seal and read. When he finished, his hands were shaking so badly he had to read it again to make sure he understood correctly. The sanctuary was burning, not metaphorically. Victor had returned to the estate, consolidated his power, and then systematically begun destroying every trace of Adrian's attempt at redemption. He started with the financial records, then the legal documents. And 3 days ago, he had shown up at the sanctuary with hired men and torches. The women inside had barely escaped. 2 were in hospital with burns. The rest were scattered across the city with nowhere to go. The building was ash. Everything Adrian had built to honor his father and atone for Evelyn and prove he could be something other than what his mother made him, gone. But that was not the worst part. The letter was from the sanctuary's administrator, a woman named Margaret who had taken over operations after Adrian left. And at the bottom, in handwriting that shook with rage, she had written something that made Adrian's blood go cold. "Your brother says this is just the beginning. Says he is going to find you and Selena. Says you do not get to walk away. Says the blackthorn curse follows blood, and you will both burn the same way this building burned." Adrian looked up. Selena was standing in the doorway reading his face. She did not need to ask what the letter said. She could see it written in the way his jaw had gone tight and his eyes had gone dead. "He found us," she said. "Not yet, but he will. Then we run again. Farther this time. Somewhere he cannot track us." Adrian folded the letter carefully. His hands had stopped shaking. That was the worst part. The absolute calm settling over him like ice water. Because he knew what this feeling meant. Knew he had felt it once before, the morning he decided to arrest Victor. The morning he chose truth over family. This was the feeling of a man who had nothing left to lose, making a choice he could not take back. "We are not running," Adrian said. "What?" "We are going back to the estate, to Victor. And we are finishing this." Selena stared at him. "Adrian, no. That is exactly what he wants. He is baiting you, trying to provoke you into a confrontation he can control." "I know. Then why?" "Because he burned the sanctuary," Adrian interrupted. "He hurt women who had already been destroyed by men just like him. He did it to get to me. And if I do nothing, he will keep doing it. He will keep hunting us, keep burning down everything I build, keep proving that people like him always win because people like me are too afraid to fight back." "So what? You walk back into his trap and let him kill you. That is your plan." "No. My plan is to walk back into his trap and kill him first." The words hung in the air. Selena's face went white. Adrian had never spoken like this before. Never let her see the part of him that was his mother's son. The part that understood cruelty and calculation and the kind of ruthlessness required to survive in a world designed to reward monsters. "You're talking about murder," Selena said quietly. "I'm talking about stopping a man who will never stop on his own. Victor is not going to prison this time. His lawyers got him out. His money protects him. The system that is supposed to deliver justice has already failed. So yes, I am talking about murder because it is the only language he understands." Selena walked closer, close enough that he could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, something that looked almost like relief. "If you do this," she said, "there is no coming back, no redemption, no sanctuary building. You will be exactly what Victor always said you were, a killer." "I was always a killer," Adrian said. "I killed my father. I just did it without knowing. This time I will know exactly what I am doing, and I will live with it, and me. What happens to me? You stay here, safe, far from whatever happens when I confront Victor." "No." "Selena, no," she repeated. "You do not get to protect me by shutting me out. We left together. If we are going back, we go back together. If you are going to become a murderer, I am going to be there to make sure you do not lose yourself completely in the process." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to forbid her from following him into the nightmare waiting at the Blackthorn estate. But he knew that look on her face, the absolute certainty that had first made him fall in love with her. Selena did not follow orders. She made choices. and she had chosen to stand beside him even when that meant watching him destroy himself. "Fine," Adrian said. "But if something happens to you because of this, then that is my choice," Selena finished, "not yours. Now stop wasting time arguing and start planning how we are going to kill your brother without getting caught." They left within the hour. No packing, no farewells to the quiet life they had built. Just two people getting on a train heading back toward the place that had destroyed them once and was preparing to do it again. Adrian spent the journey planning. Victor would be expecting him, would have guards, would have prepared for the possibility that Adrian might actually fight back instead of running, which meant a direct confrontation was suicide. But Victor had one weakness, the same weakness that had gotten him arrested the first time: arrogance. He believed he was smarter than Adrian, believed he understood cruelty better, believed that Adrian's conscience would always make him hesitate at the critical moment, and that belief would get him killed. The train arrived in the city at midnight. Adrian and Selena took a hired carriage to the edge of the Blackthorn estate and walked the rest of the way on foot. The grounds were dark, except for lights burning in the main house. Victor was awake, probably celebrating, probably already planning his next move against whatever remained of Adrian's reputation. They circled around to the East Gardens, to the greenhouse that Adrian had transformed into a sanctuary before Victor burned it down. The structure was gone, but the foundation remained. And underneath the foundation, hidden in the space where Adrian's father had concealed his evidence, was something Adrian had left behind when he fled, a contingency plan. Because some part of him had always known he would have to come back. He found the loose brick, reached into the hollow space, pulled out a metal box. Inside was a gun, loaded, ready. Adrian had hidden it there the night before he left, telling himself he would never need it, telling himself he was done with violence. But men like Adrian never really left violence behind. They just pretended until circumstances made pretending impossible. Selena looked at the gun, then at Adrian. Her face was unreadable in the darkness. "You planned this," she said. "Even when you were running, you were planning to come back. I hoped I would not need to. But yes, I planned for it." "What else did you plan?" Adrian pulled a second item from the box, a file folder. Inside were documents, bank records, communications, evidence of every crime Victor had committed that had not been admissible in his original trial. Adrian had been building a case even as he was fleeing, gathering ammunition for a war he hoped would never come. "If the gun does not work," Adrian said, "these will. Either Victor dies tonight or he goes back to prison for crimes even his lawyers cannot get him out of. One way or another, this ends." Selena took the file and looked through it. Her hands were steady. She had long since stopped flinching at the reality of what they were planning. "How do we get to him?" she asked. "The same way I always got to him. Through the parts of the house no one else remembers. The servant passages, the hidden doors, the architecture our father built to move through the estate unseen. Victor knows about those. Victor knows the main ones. But there are others. Passages father built in the final years of his life when he was hiding from mother. Passages I found in his journal. Passages Victor never learned about because I never told him." Adrian stood. The gun felt heavy in his hand, not because of its weight, because of what it represented. The final abandonment of every principle he had spent 18 months trying to rebuild his life around. The acceptance that sometimes survival required becoming the monster you were fighting. And somewhere in the rational part of his brain that was still trying to argue for alternatives, Adrian knew this was exactly what his mother would have wanted. For him to embrace the Blackthorn legacy of blood and violence and ruthless self-preservation. But his mother was dead, and the women Victor hurt were not. So he led Selena through the gardens to a door hidden behind overgrown ivy. The door was locked, but the mechanism was old. Adrian forced it open with a knife he had brought for exactly this purpose. They slipped inside. The passage was narrow and dark and smelled like rot, but it led exactly where Adrian remembered. Through the walls, past the servant quarters. Emerging in the oldest part of the manor, the wing father had used as his private study before mother killed him. They moved in silence, every footstep calculated, every breath controlled. Adrian had spent 30 years learning to move through this house like a ghost. That training served him now as they navigated corridors that should have been familiar but felt alien after 18 months away. They reached the study. The door was ajar. Light spilled into the hallway, and inside Adrian could hear Victor's voice, not alone, talking to someone. His tone was casual, relaxed, the sound of a man who believed he had won. Adrian pressed himself against the wall beside the door and listened. Victor was talking to Beatrice. Apparently she had been released early for good behavior, or more likely, Victor had paid someone. Either way, she was back, and from what Adrian could hear, they were planning something new, something that would destroy not just Adrian's reputation, but Selena's too. A smear campaign designed to paint them as criminals who had embezzled from the sanctuary before abandoning it. It was elegant, brutal, exactly the kind of long-term character assassination that Victor excelled at, and it was about to get him killed. Adrian looked at Selena. She nodded. She was ready. They had talked about this on the train, about what happened if Victor was not alone, about whether Adrian could kill 2 people instead of 1. The answer was yes, because at some point in the last 18 months of running, Adrian had accepted something fundamental about himself. He was capable of violence, always had been. His mother had seen it, had cultivated it, had turned him into a weapon and then pointed him at his father. The difference now was that Adrian was choosing his own targets. He kicked the door open. Victor was standing behind the desk. Beatrice was sitting in a chair by the window. Both of them froze. Victor's face cycled through shock, fear, and then something that looked almost like satisfaction. "I knew you would come back," Victor said. "I knew you could not resist." "You burned the sanctuary," Adrian said. His voice was flat, dead. The voice of someone who had already made peace with what he was about to do. "Yes. And tomorrow I am burning your cottage. The day after that, I'm going after Selena's family. Everyone you care about, everyone who helped you. I'm going to destroy all of it until there is nothing left of you except the memory that you failed." "Why?" "Because you arrested me," Victor said. "Because you dragged the Blackthorn name through the mud. Because you tried to be better than what we are, and in doing so you proved that people like us do not get redemption. We get revenge, and I am very good at revenge." Adrian raised the gun. Beatrice screamed. Victor did not flinch. "You will not shoot me," Victor said. "You are not capable of it. You are too much of a coward, too afraid of becoming me." "You are right," Adrian said. "I am afraid of becoming you, but I am more afraid of letting you hurt anyone else." He fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Victor jerked backward. Blood bloomed across his chest. He looked down at the wound with an expression of genuine surprise. Then he looked back at Adrian and laughed. It was a wet, broken sound. Blood bubbled at his lips, but the laugh was real. "There it is," Victor gasped. "The real you. Mother would be so proud." He collapsed. Adrian stood over him and watched his brother die. It took longer than he expected, long enough that Victor's eyes stayed focused on Adrian's face, long enough that his final words came out clear despite the blood filling his lungs. "You think this ends it," Victor whispered. "But it does not. You are a murderer now, just like Mother, just like me. You will never escape what you are." Then he stopped breathing. Adrian lowered the gun. His hand was steady. That was the worst part. He had just killed his brother and his hand was steady. No shaking, no tears, just the cold certainty of someone who had crossed a line they could never uncross. Behind him, Beatrice was sobbing. Selena had moved to block the door, preventing her from running. Adrian turned to face the woman who had helped kill Evelyn, who had helped Victor plan the destruction of everything Adrian built. She looked terrified, small, nothing like the elegant lady who had moved through aristocratic circles with such confidence. "Please," Beatrice whispered, "please. I will leave. I will disappear. I will never speak of this. Just let me go." Adrian looked at her, and for a moment he considered it, considered letting her run, letting her carry the weight of witnessing fratricide for the rest of her life. But then he thought about the women in the hospital, about the sanctuary burning, about every person his family had destroyed while people like Beatrice stood by and helped because it was easier than resisting. He raised the gun again. Selena's voice cut through the room. "Adrian, stop!" He looked at her. She was standing with her back against the door, her face pale, but her eyes steady. "If you kill her," Selena said, "it is not justice. It is execution. There is a difference." "She helped kill Evelyn," Adrian said, "and she went to prison for it. She served time. She paid a price. Victor was actively trying to kill us. She is just a broken woman who made terrible choices. Killing her accomplishes nothing except making you into something you cannot come back from." "I already cannot come back," Adrian said. "I just murdered my brother. You killed a man who is threatening to burn down our lives. That is different than executing someone who is begging for mercy." They stared at each other across Victor's corpse, and Adrian realized this was the real test, not whether he could kill Victor. That had been inevitable from the moment he read about the sanctuary burning. The real test was whether he could stop, whether he could choose to be something other than the weapon his mother had created. He lowered the gun. Beatrice collapsed forward, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Adrian walked over to her and crouched down so they were eye level. "You're going to leave England," he said quietly. "Tonight. You're going to disappear and never speak of this family again. If I ever hear your name connected to the Blackthorn estate, if I ever find out you have told anyone what happened here, I will finish what I started. Do you understand?" Beatrice nodded frantically. "Say it." "I understand. I will leave. I will never speak of this. Please, just let me go." Adrian stood and stepped aside. Beatrice scrambled to her feet and ran. They heard her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Then silence. Selina walked over and stood beside Adrian. They looked down at Victor's body, the blood pooling on the antique carpet, the vacant eyes staring at the ceiling. "What do we do now?" Selina asked. Adrian pulled out the file of evidence he had brought. "We stage it, make it look like Victor found this evidence, realized his crimes were about to be exposed, and killed himself rather than face justice. Will anyone believe that? Does it matter? Victor is dead. The estate will pass to distant cousins who have no idea what happened here. The Blackthorn curse dies with him. And us. We disappear. Again. Permanently this time." They spent the next 2 hours staging the scene. Adrian placed the gun in Victor's hand, positioned the evidence on the desk where it would be found immediately, wrote a suicide note in Victor's handwriting confessing to everything: Evelyn's murder, the sanctuary burning, the conspiracy with their mother. It was not perfect, but it was believable enough. And more importantly, it was over. They left the estate the same way they came, through the hidden passages, out into the gardens. By the time the servants found Victor's body in the morning, Adrian and Selina were already on a train heading north, to Scotland, to somewhere even more remote than the cottage by the sea, to a place where the Blackthorn name meant nothing and the past could not follow them. Shots. But as the train carried them away from the estate, away from the murder, away from everything, Adrian sat by the window and felt nothing. He had killed his brother, had become exactly what Victor always said he would become, had proven that underneath all the sanctuary building and redemption seeking, he was just another Blackthorn, just another man willing to use violence to solve problems that should have been solved through law and justice and civilized methods. Selina sat beside him holding his hand. She had not spoken since they left the estate, had not judged or comforted or tried to make him feel better about what he had done. She just sat there, present, solid, reminding him that he was not alone even if he felt like a monster. The train rattled through the darkness. Outside, England disappeared behind them. And inside, Adrian tried to convince himself that killing Victor had been necessary, that it had been self-defense, that any judge would understand why he did it. But he knew better. He had not killed Victor in self-defense. He had killed him in revenge, in rage, in the cold calculation that some people were too dangerous to let live. And that made him exactly what his mother had tried to create. A man who understood that power came from the willingness to destroy anyone who threatened it. The train slowed. They were approaching a station, a place to change trains, to continue running. Adrian looked at his reflection in the dark window and barely recognized the man staring back. Then Selina spoke for the first time in hours. "We have to go back," she said. Adrian turned. "What?" "To the estate. We have to go back." "Why?" "Victor is dead. It is over." "No," Selina said. "It is not over. Because we did not think about the servants, did not think about the guards, did not think about all the people who will have seen us in the area, who will connect Victor's death to our return. We were so focused on killing him, we did not think about what happens after. No one saw us." "Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain that not one person saw us approach the estate? Not one servant heard the gunshot? Not one guard noticed movement in the gardens. Adrian's stomach dropped, because she was right. He had been so focused on the confrontation, on the moment of killing Victor, that he had not thought through the aftermath, had not considered that staging a suicide only worked if no one had any reason to question it. And if even one person placed them at the estate the night Victor died, "We will be arrested for murder," Adrian finished. "Yes." They sat in silence as the train pulled into the station. Passengers boarded and departed. The world continued moving while Adrian's carefully constructed escape plan collapsed around him. "Then what do we do?" he asked. "Go back and hope we covered our tracks well enough, or keep running and hope no one connects us to his death?" Selina looked at him with eyes that had seen him at his worst and chosen to stay anyway. "Neither," she said. "We go back, and we tell the truth." "What truth?" "That Victor was trying to kill us, that we went to the estate to confront him, that he pulled a gun and you shot him in self-defense, that everything we did was to protect ourselves from a man who had already committed murder and was threatening to do it again." "That is not what happened." "Close enough. And it is believable. More believable than a staged suicide that will fall apart the moment anyone investigates. They will still arrest us, put us on trial. Maybe, or maybe the evidence you brought will prove that Victor was a monster and any jury will understand why you did what you did. Maybe we fight this in court instead of running. Maybe we finally face the consequences instead of pretending we can escape them." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways that plan could fail, all the ways they could end up in prison for the rest of their lives. But looking at Selina, he realized she was offering him something he had been trying to find for 2 years. Not escape, not redemption, but accountability. The chance to stand up and say, "Yes, I did this, and here is why, and you can judge me for it, but at least I am not hiding anymore." The train began to move again. North, away from the estate, away from consequences. Adrian pulled the emergency cord. The train screeched to a halt. Passengers shouted in confusion. The conductor came running, demanding to know what was happening. Adrian stood and looked at Selina. "We are going back," he said. She smiled. "About time." They got off the train at the next station and bought tickets back to the city, back to the estate, back to face whatever came next. And as they sat on the platform waiting for the southbound train, Adrian felt something he had not felt in 2 years. Not peace, not redemption, not even hope, but something close to honest, something that felt like he was finally becoming the man his father had tried to be, instead of the weapon his mother had made him. The train arrived, they boarded, and as it carried them back toward judgment and justice and consequences, Adrian looked at Selina and saw his future. Not in a cottage by the sea, not in escape or anonymity or the quiet erasure of his past, but in the willingness to stand and face the truth, whatever it cost. They arrived at the estate at dawn to find it surrounded by police. Someone had discovered Victor's body. Someone had already raised the alarm, and as Adrian and Selina approached the gates, they were immediately recognized and arrested. No resistance, no explanations, just the click of handcuffs and the reading of rights, and the long ride to the police station in the back of a carriage that smelled like fear and justice. At the station, they were separated. Adrian was taken to an interrogation room where 2 detectives waited with expressions that suggested they had already decided he was guilty. The questioning lasted hours. "Where were you last night? When did you arrive at the estate? Did you kill your brother? Why? What proof do you have that it was self-defense?" Adrian told them everything. About Victor's release, about the sanctuary burning, about the threats, about returning to confront him, about the gun Victor had pulled, a lie, but one that made the narrative work, about shooting him before he could shoot first. He gave them the evidence file, showed them proof of Victor's crimes, explained the history of conspiracy and murder that had led to this moment. The detectives listened without expression. When he finished, they left him alone in the room for 3 hours while they verified his story. And in those 3 hours, sitting in a gray room with nothing but his thoughts, Adrian finally understood what his father had been trying to teach him that summer before he died. That honor was not about never making mistakes. It was about owning them when you did. That strength was not about always winning. It was about standing up after you lost. That being a good man did not mean being a perfect man. It meant being willing to face judgment for your imperfections. His father had tried to expose Catherine's crimes knowing it would destroy his family, had chosen truth over preservation, and he had died because of that choice. But he had died honest, and that was worth something. The door opened. The lead detective walked in and sat down across from Adrian. His expression was unreadable. "Your story checks out," he said. "The evidence you provided proves Victor Blackthorne was guilty of multiple crimes, including conspiracy to commit murder. The servants confirm he was armed. The scene is consistent with self-defense." Adrian let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "However," the detective continued, "you entered the estate illegally. You brought a weapon with intent to confront a man you knew was dangerous. You staged the scene to look like a suicide before changing your mind and coming forward. These are serious charges regardless of the justification." "What happens now?" Adrian asked. "Now, we take this to the prosecutor. He decides whether to charge you with murder, manslaughter, or nothing at all. Could go any direction. But I will tell you this. The prosecutor is not a fan of aristocratic families getting away with crimes because of their names. So do not expect mercy just because your brother was a monster." "I do not want mercy," Adrian said. "I want judgment, whatever I deserve." The detective studied him, then he nodded. "We will see if you still feel that way when you are sitting in prison." He stood and left. Adrian was taken to a holding cell to wait for the prosecutor's decision. Selina was in a cell nearby. He could hear her voice through the walls telling her own story, confirming his account, standing beside him even when it meant facing criminal charges for helping cover up a homicide. And as Adrian sat on the thin mattress in a cell that smelled like despair, he realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. This was how it ended. Not with escape or redemption or a quiet life by the sea, but with consequences, with accountability, with the final acknowledgement that you could not undo the past. You could only face it and hope the future was worth the price. His father would have understood. His mother would have been disgusted. And Adrian finally did not care what either of them thought, because for the first time in his entire life, he was making decisions for himself, facing judgment on his own terms, choosing truth even when it destroyed him, and that was the only freedom that mattered. The cell door opened. The detective was back. His expression had changed, something almost like respect in his eyes. "The prosecutor reviewed the case," he said. "Given the evidence of Victor's crimes and the testimony supporting your claim of self-defense, he has decided not to file murder charges." Adrian felt his chest unclench. "However," the detective continued, "you will be charged with illegal entry, weapons possession, and obstruction of justice for staging the suicide. You are looking at 18 months to 3 years depending on the judge. Your trial is set for 3 months from now. Until then, you are remanded to custody. Bail is denied given your previous flight risk." Adrian nodded. He could live with that. 3 years was nothing compared to what Victor would have done to them. 3 years was a small price for ending the Blackthorne curse forever. "What about Selina?" Adrian asked. "Accessories charges. Likely probation given her cooperation. She will be released tomorrow pending trial." Adrian closed his eyes. Relief washed over him. Selina would be free, would be safe, would have a chance to build the life she deserved without him dragging her down into the consequences of his family's crimes. The detective left. The cell door closed, and Adrian sat in the silence of a jail cell and waited for whatever came next. But he was not afraid, because the worst had already happened. He had killed his brother, had become the thing he feared most, had proven that violence lived in him the same way it lived in every Blackthorne, and he had survived it, not unchanged, not redeemed, but alive, honest, ready to face judgment instead of running from it. The trial 3 months later was a spectacle. Every newspaper covered it. Every aristocrat had an opinion. The prosecution argued Adrian was a cold-blooded killer who murdered his brother and staged a cover-up. The defense argued he was a victim defending himself against a man who had already committed murder and was threatening to do it again. The jury deliberated for 6 days. When they came back, their verdict was guilty on all counts except murder, illegal entry, weapons possession, obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to 2 years in prison. Adrian stood when the sentence was read and did not flinch. He had expected worse. And 2 years was manageable. 2 years was survivable. 2 years was the price of ending Victor's reign of terror and making sure no one else got hurt. Selena was given probation and community service for her role in the cover-up. She was in the courtroom when the sentence was handed down. Their eyes met across the distance. She did not smile, but he saw the promise in her expression. She would wait, and when he got out, they would start over again. Not in a cottage by the sea, not hiding from the past, but somewhere in the middle, somewhere between running and confronting, somewhere they could finally build a life that was theirs instead of his family's. The guards led Adrian away. He looked back once and saw Selena standing alone in the courtroom watching him disappear, and he knew that whatever happened in the next 2 years, she would be there when he got out, because some bonds could not be broken by prison or scandal or consequences. Some bonds were forged in fire and emerged stronger for it. Prison was exactly as terrible as he expected. Gray walls, bad food, men who looked at him with either hatred for his former title or respect for being willing to kill family. Adrian kept his head down, served his time, and thought about what he would do when he got out. Not rebuild the sanctuary. That dream had died with Victor, but something smaller, something honest. Maybe a cottage somewhere quiet where he and Selena could paint and garden and exist without the weight of legacy crushing them. Maybe that was redemption, not grand gestures or public atonement, but the quiet choice to live honestly after years of living as lies. Selena visited every week. They sat across from each other in the visiting room and talked about nothing important. Books she was reading, places she wanted to travel, gossip from the city, normal things, human things. And slowly, over months of visiting and letters and the passage of time, Adrian began to believe that maybe he could survive this, that maybe killing Victor had not destroyed him completely, that maybe there was still a future worth living after prison and scandal and the final collapse of the Blackthorn name. But then, 6 months into his sentence, something happened that shattered every belief he had managed to rebuild. Selena stopped visiting. At first he thought she was sick. Then he thought maybe she had been arrested for something he did not know about. But when he finally got a letter from her 3 weeks later, the truth was worse than anything he had imagined. She was leaving. Not just leaving him. Leaving England. Disappearing to somewhere he would never find her. Because after 6 months of watching him sit in prison for crimes his family forced him to commit, she realized something she could not ignore anymore. The Blackthorn curse did not just destroy the people born into the family. It destroyed everyone they touched. Every person who loved them, every person who tried to help them, every person who believed they could be saved. And Selena was done being destroyed. "I love you," she wrote, "but love is not enough. You will always be tied to this place, to this legacy, to the violence your mother planted in you, and I cannot spend my life waiting for the next crisis, the next revelation, the next moment when you choose vengeance over peace. I have to save myself. Even if it means abandoning you, I am sorry, but I am also done." Adrian read the letter 20 times, each time hoping the words would change, hoping he had misunderstood. But the message was clear. She was gone, and he was alone. Completely, absolutely, irrevocably alone. No family, no love, no future except 18 more months in prison, followed by a life as a convicted criminal with nothing to his name except the ashes of a legacy he had spent years trying to escape. He had thought killing Victor was the end, had thought facing judgment was the final price. But he was wrong. The curse was not over. It had just found a new way to destroy him. And this time, there was no coming back from it. Adrian Blackthorn learned what true solitude meant in a prison cell at 34 years old. Not the solitude of choosing to be alone, which carried a certain romantic nobility, but the solitude of being abandoned, of watching the one person who had promised to stay walk away because even love had limits, and his family's curse had finally found hers. He stopped going to the visiting room after Selena's letter. There was no point. No one else was coming. The distant cousins who inherited the estate wanted nothing to do with him. The aristocracy had already written him off as the murderous duke who destroyed his own bloodline. And the few people who might have cared were too afraid of being contaminated by association. So Adrian served his remaining 18 months in silence. He worked in the prison library, read books that had nothing to do with power or legacy or revenge, philosophy, poetry, stories about ordinary people living ordinary lives. And slowly, in the quiet spaces between one day and the next, something inside him began to shift, not healing. That word suggested a return to what he had been before, and Adrian knew he could never go back to being the man who stood at Evelyn's funeral and believed he understood how the world worked. That man was dead, killed by the same hand that had killed Victor, killed by the accumulation of truths too heavy to carry. But if not healing, then perhaps acceptance. The slow recognition that he had spent his entire life trying to be worthy of a legacy that was never worth inheriting, that his mother had not created him to be good or strong or honorable. She had created him to be controllable, and every choice he made trying to escape that control had only proven how deeply her programming ran. He had killed his father by obeying her, had destroyed Selena by choosing duty over love, had married Evelyn out of obligation and failed to save her from the same conspiracy that had killed his father. And when he finally tried to break free, to build something honest, he had done it by becoming exactly what his mother would have wanted: a killer. A man who understood that power came from the willingness to destroy. The realization should have broken him, should have sent him spiraling into the kind of despair that made men hang themselves with bedsheets in the middle of the night when the guards were not looking. But instead, it did something else. It freed him. Because if he was never going to be worthy, if he was never going to earn redemption, if he was always going to carry the weight of his family's crimes and his own failures, then he could stop trying, could stop performing, could stop building sanctuaries and making grand gestures and desperately searching for absolution that would never come. He could just exist, flawed, guilty, human. And maybe that was enough. The thought came to him one morning in the prison yard while he was watching other inmates play cards. They were laughing about something stupid. One of them had just been released and was talking about the restaurant he was going to eat at first thing, describing the food in detail that made everyone else groan with envy. It was mundane, trivial, the kind of conversation Adrian would have dismissed as beneath him 2 years ago. But watching them, he felt something he had not felt in years: envy. Not for their freedom, though that was part of it, but for their ability to find joy in small things, to laugh about restaurants and card games and stupid jokes while living in a place designed to crush human spirit. They had figured out something Adrian was only beginning to understand: that survival was not about winning or redemption or proving your worth. It was about finding reasons to keep going even when logic said you should give up, about holding on to small pleasures in the middle of overwhelming darkness, about being human instead of trying to be something greater. Adrian started joining their card games, not talking much, just sitting, playing, existing alongside people who did not care about his title or his crimes or his tragic backstory. People who knew him only as Adrian, the guy who worked in the library and was decent at poker. And in those card games, surrounded by murderers and thieves and men who had made terrible choices and were paying the price, Adrian found something he had been searching for his entire life. He found community. Not the performative community of aristocratic balls and political alliances, but the real kind, the kind that formed between people who had nothing left except each other. One of the men, a former dock worker named Thomas, who was serving time for manslaughter, asked him one day why a duke was slumming it with common criminals. Adrian looked at him for a long moment. Then he said something he had never said out loud before: "Because I'm a common criminal. Same as you. The only difference is I had a nicer house when I did it." Thomas laughed. It was a genuine sound, not mocking, just appreciative of the honesty. "You know what your problem is," Thomas said. "You think being a duke made you special. But it did not. It just made you rich. And rich people are not better than poor people. They are just louder about their mistakes." Adrian thought about that for days. And he realized Thomas was right. Every mistake he had made, every crime, every moment of cruelty or cowardice had been magnified by his position. The Blackthorn curse was not some mystical force that destroyed everyone it touched. It was just wealth and power concentrating human weakness until it became catastrophic. His mother had not been evil because she was born wrong. She had been evil because she had the resources to act on her worst impulses without consequences. And she had raised Adrian to believe that was normal. That dukes got to kill and steal and manipulate because that was the price of maintaining power. But it was a lie. Power did not require cruelty. It enabled it. And the only way to break the cycle was to give up the power entirely, which Adrian had already done. Not by choice, but the result was the same. He was no one now, no title, no estate, no legacy. Just a man serving time for killing his brother in what might have been self-defense, or might have been murder depending on who you asked.